Welcome back to another episode of RNT Fitness Radio. Akash and I have just wrapped up an interview with Paul Carter, aka Lift Run Bang, which you can find across socials at Lift Run Bang, as well as his blog. And wow, what an episode. This one is around 2 hours long. So for those of you with step goals, this is going to keep you covered for a good couple of days. And Paul left nothing on the table. This was deep. He covered his previous marriage. We went through relationship advice. We went through kind of insecurities, reasons that most people get into lifting. We touched on performance enhancing drugs. Akash got to geek out with productivity and writing talk. Of course, we covered training, supplements, supplemental ketones. I'm trying to think what else. We've literally just got off the call, and you can see how kind of excited I am to get this one out there. Anyway, listen for yourself. You're gonna find something that you resonate with. I think you guys are gonna love this one.
4 minutes to watch me eat.
Brilliant, go for it.
Okay,
that's fine by us. Yeah, take your time. We're in no rush, by the way, so it's just however long you've got.
Oh, I'm actually my schedule is freed up this morning, so awesome. we can take as long as you guys need to.
Awesome, that'd be cool.
What time is it there?
It's 4:30 in the afternoon.
Where are you guys at exactly?
We're in London. So I'm northwest London, and then Adam's more closer to Gatwick, so more South London.
Do you guys know Chris Knott?
Yeah, we just podcasted with him actually a couple of weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
We've taught a seminar at his gym as well, or the gym that he works for, last year, and they've got us back on April the 1st, teaching another one. He's a really good guy.
Yeah, I did a podcast with him, and he had talked about having me out to do a seminar there at that gym.
It's an amazing gym for the UK.
That's what he said.
It's a really, really good facility for the UK. And the owner of it is a really laid back guy. Akash and I were really impressed when we got there.
Yeah, very well equipped, very chilled, great banter within the trainers. So you'll have a good time there.
Yeah, like a lot of gyms. A lot of gyms you get that.
Manchester.
That's it, yeah, Manchester, yeah. That's it. A lot of gyms you kind of, the trainers, there's a little bit of like animosity between them and so on. Whereas at FLF, like all of them are so friendly. They're all trying to help each other. There's no egos. It's a really unique gym for the UK anyway.
Do you find that that whole animosity thing is kind of a commonality there in the UK?
Yeah. People, the way that trainers here try and get on the map is by slating other trainers, for the most part anyway, rather than what Akash and I are focusing on is just giving out free content, free value. That's what we're all about. Whereas other trainers tend to belittle other trainers to try and make themselves superior, when in fact you just come across negative.
You come across, actually, I was going to say, you come across very insecure in your own abilities at that point. It's kind of like guys do that with females very often. Yeah. And I don't realize it has the same effect. So if you're interested in a female and you think she's interested in another guy and you start talking shit on him, it absolutely is a poor reflection on you.
Yeah, it just speaks volumes that you're not secure enough in yourself, right?
Absolutely. I actually, one time, you guys know who Jason Pegg is?
He's a powerlifter, right? He's a powerlifter? Yeah.
So Peg and I are really good friends. For a while there, he was my bestie for quite a few years. And I love Peg, but I was with him one time, and this girl met me out. And, we're sitting there with this girl. I just met her for the first time, and he's just like dogging me out like the whole time she's sitting there. And like, I want to punch him in the grill so bad, because I'm like, that's stuff you do when you're with bros. Right?
Yeah.
You're bros, like we shit on each other, and that's kind of a way of male bonding.
Of course, yeah.
But when you're around females, you're supposed to make your bros look good, and and vice versa.
Yeah.
He's just like dogging me out. Like she goes to the bathroom and I go, dude, what the hell are you doing? But he this concept on him was totally lost. So
yes, it's bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah, the date still went well because I'm Paul Carter.
I love that.
Actually, I've been having woman problems for about the past, I don't know, year.
Yeah, we're big listeners of Geared Up.
Yeah, we love your stuff on when you start talking about relationships.
Yeah, we love it. And then you got McVeigh, trying to. We love it when you go off on a rant. So that's why we thought you'd be awesome on here. Is we want to kind of obviously your background is training and everything, but we like some of the life stuff that you put out. So we want to try and bring that into this podcast
now to talk about life stuff, and that's why McVeigh ended up making me a regular, was because we did like one show together, and he said he's never gotten that many messages about keeping somebody on, and he wanted to take the show kind of in a different, because there's only so much you can talk about bodybuilding or powerlifting or any of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Duffin just had me on last week, and we stayed on stuff like intermittent fasting and gut health and stuff. But he wanted to have me on for that reason and talk about life stuff and relationships and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of become my niche in the fitness world.
It's refreshing. No one talks about it.
No, I mean, they really don't. We talked about that on the last Geared Up podcast, and that was depression with men in their late 30s and early 40s, and how the suicide rates and everything like that. And I said, well, one of the reasons why men don't talk about it. They don't talk about it because it's perceived as a weakness. If a man talks about how he's sad or lonely, or he feels isolated from the world, and he's struggling with problems in his life, we kind of get brought up in this way. We probably should be recording all this, right? Like this.
Well, I've got it on record, but we haven't done an intro. So let's just roll with this, and I can record an intro at the end.
So that was a lot of what we discussed. That sounds good on the recording with a mouth.
Yeah, but for those that are listening in, we started a little bit early. Paul said, "Is it okay if he quickly eats?" And we're like, "Yeah, that's fine." And actually, the conversation's just turned into stuff that is probably going to be really helpful.
That's how it works, right?
Exactly.
You do a podcast, like the first 10 minutes before you start, you talk so much good stuff, and then you start, and it feels a little more contrived.
Yeah. So, Lewis, when you're listening to this, our podcast editor, leave this in. Leave this in.
So, we were talking about that, and it's always perceived, I don't want to say always because that's an absolute, but it's usually perceived as a weakness by men. Talk about these things, and I wrote an article years ago for Elite FTS talking about suicide rates in men and why men have so much trouble asking for help, admitting that they're struggling, admitting that they're suffering. Mm-hmm. And we do that a lot. We suffer in silence, right? I mean, you guys have probably been through periods. How old are you guys?
I'm 28 next week.
All right. You haven't hit the deepest valleys of your life yet. Trust me, they're coming.
Well, it's funny. I'm bringing that up with you later on, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about you?
I'm 26 next month, so we're both pretty young.
6?
Yeah.
Man, you got some awful years ahead of you.
Thanks for that. Bring it on.
Compared to now, like there's some, a lot of people tell you like it gets better I think there's a lot more self-awareness that happens in your 30s and 40s. But it's something I talked about this morning, and this would be a really good topic that I've been studying a ton, and I can actually talk from personal experience on this one. You guys probably know from reading all my stuff, I don't have a problem being vulnerable or opening up or talking about this stuff. There's really just not a lot of people, really, if anybody, in the fitness industry that kind of hits on these topics. I think, at least I've never seen them.
Do you think part of it is because a lot of people perhaps got into the fitness industry out of like insecurities and stuff, so they try so damn hard to like overcompensate and hide it?
Dude, I think that's absolutely spot on. I think there's a significant amount of overcompensation that goes on for people's. They're living through ego, right, rather than living for transparency.
Yep.
So there's a constant projection of what they want everyone else to see. Right. And I'm not saying that with everybody, because I'm not saying everybody's fake, and I'm not saying there's no real people out there, whatever. But does it exist? Absolutely. I mean, it exists in real life. But I do think lifting often is a draw to a lot of us because we're so unhappy about where we are in our life, and we either want the attention or affirmation or affection from other people. We want that, right? Like as bros, when we start lifting, why did you guys start lifting? What was the whole purpose that you guys started lifting?
So, funnily enough, I mentioned this on a podcast the other day that Akash wasn't aware of. Mine's actually that my stepdad was physically abusive to me when I was younger. Mm-hmm. So I never realized this until recently. Subconsciously, when I was like 13, 14, I started doing like press ups in my bedroom, doing crunches. I went and bought one of those old school like York barbell sets.
And it all comes back to stuff that we suffered from in our youngest days. But go ahead.
Yeah, and I'd always told myself. So I had a leg operation, and I was when I was like 15, pins and plates in my legs, wheelchair bound and everything. And I rehabbed myself from that, and that's kind of what then led me into the actual being a trainer side of things. But when I look back at the actual what got me into lifting itself, not just training somebody and coaching people, lifting myself, it's actually probably stems from the fact that obviously my stepdad was bigger than me at the time, stronger than me. So at 13 years old, I'm sat there, as I said, doing my press ups in my room, not realizing this back then. It's looking back now that, yeah, that's probably the catalyst for starting it.
And that's really great for somebody that's your age, kind of getting a handle on some of those introspective things as to why we do the things that we do, right? Mm-hmm. So what about you, Akash? Why did you start? What do you believe that the reason you started lifting was?
I think mine was more.
I'm interviewing you guys, but go ahead.
I think mine was more to do with insecurity of how I looked. I was skinny with moobs and a pot belly, and I kind of just it was more to kind of impress girls and feel more secure about myself.
Yeah. And what's crazy is like for so many of us that start off lifting to get a better physique so we'll get more attention from girls, we just end up getting a ton of attention from guys. Also having a better body will get them attention from girls. And there's kind of there's a cyclical thing that happens there, right? And that we end up spending all these years to look better because we think that'll get us the woman we want. And then as men, like we don't spend enough time cultivating the other parts of our life that actually, because women enjoy what a man looks like, of course, but it's not what you look like. It's how you make her feel. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's far more important to come to an understanding of how to make a woman feel attraction for you rather than look attractive, right? I'm not saying looking attractive doesn't help, but there's lots of hot guys out there that can't go on a few dates with a girl before she's like, well, this guy's a douchebag.
Dead behind the eyes, right? Got nothing to him.
Right. So cultivating your soul and your heart and all those kind of things is vitally important. And so like the topic that I was going to talk on, because this has become very, this is kind of boiled to the surface in my own life. And it's something I wrote a little bit about, finished an article on today. And I had a pretty traumatic childhood. And when I was 13 years old, my best friend got killed. He'd been my best friend since I was 5 years old. And during the time, my father was suffering from some traumatic PTSD problems. He did a couple of tours at Nam. He was really abusive at the time. So my best friend got killed. My dad was like off the chain emotionally and mentally for a while. And like a year later, my mother left him and took me with her. Mm-hmm. And she divorced him. And I think it was like probably about a year after that, I was essentially living on my own. Like, I was like 14, almost 15 years old, and kind of in a way almost completely abandoned by my family at the time. It was a mess. And so like probably a year after that, my parents actually reconciled and got back together. But me and my dad, of course, from all those years that he was going through that stuff that he and I were clashing, the damage is done at that point. Mm-hmm. And it changes your neuroplasticity in your brain. I wrote a little bit about that, like your attachment types, right? And so I had suffered all this loss at a really young age, a loss of people that were supposed to either be teaching me about love and intimacy and connection and security, and then the loss of my best friend and those kind of things. So as I got older, and it's still going on, it's something that I'm actually working on to this day, is that when I feel someone pulling away, I would become a total asshole. Yeah. And a lot of people don't understand even when you become an adult, you carry that attachment type with you throughout life, right? Unless you're going to deal with it, unless you're going to make an effort to deal with it. And you can be anxious, or you can be avoidant of love and intimacy, or you can be secure. But what I started to understand was through therapy was that it wasn't what the other person was doing or saying in my life. It was what they were doing or saying that was causing those feelings from my younger days to come to the surface, right? Now you're not really conscious of it when it's happening, that that's what it is, right? Like that's the point. You just know it gives you an unbelievable amount of fear and anxiety,
Yeah.
like overriding. I don't know if you guys have ever been through like a breakup, or you have found yourself so overwhelmed with anxiety about losing someone or something in your life that you have, like, you're in a fog and you know you're not saying and doing things that feel logical and that kind of stuff. And so emotions develop in the amygdala, right? But the frontal lobe of the brain is where our logical thought processes happen.
Mhm.
Well, the emotions are so strong and powerful, they kind of light up, your whole sensory board. It will overrun that frontal lobe of the brain where you develop the logical thinking patterns where you're supposed to apply logic in your life, where your reaction or action should be congruent with the situation that just happened.
Mhm.
And so when you have a trigger in your life that comes from past pain, then what will happen is those emotions will be so strong, it just overrides that. You're not making logical decisions. You're not saying logical things because the pain is so great and you haven't dealt with it. You haven't put those demons to rest. So that's something I've actually been working on in my life. And like I said, a lot of men don't like to either talk about these things or admit these things because they're like, oh, well, that's a form of weakness. You should be more disciplined than that, or you should this or whatever. We all have these different triggers. And I know that that word's been overused a lot by people in, say, colleges that need safe spaces because somebody used a word they don't like. That's completely different. But we do all have these emotional triggers that can kind of send us into orbit, for not acting and reacting rationally to what's going on around us. And it's very important for someone to spend some time kind of coming to terms with why that's happening so they can kind of lay those demons to rest and become a far more secure and whole person in their own life. So that way their decisions and choices and those kind of things can have a lot more logic embedded with them.
Interesting. So, you mentioned you've done some therapy for this.
Yes.
Is this like a long-term ongoing thing, or did you do like a short stint? Have you found the solution, or is it still finding it? Like, talk us through
Well,
that side of things.
no, I worked with a guy that specializes in this stuff, and just doing actually just a few phone sessions a week to really talk about these things. Number one, because I'm interested in them, and um, I think the first place that you start healing in your life is yourself, right? Like you have to heal yourself with whatever it is you're dealing with. Until you heal yourself, and like I said, kind of come to terms with those demons that you're wrestling with, you will screw up every relationship that you encounter that ends up rubbing up against those pain points for the rest of your life. So you've got to find a way to cultivate healthy coping mechanisms, and really just to learn how to let go. And that was something else that I kind of learned through these coaching sessions. And for you guys, the people that end up listening to this, I mean, this was very eye opening to me. And that is, when you love somebody, love is really about freedom. It really is. It's about allowing them to have complete autonomy in their life. And that means that they're free to go where they want to, spend time with who they want to, do what they want to. And then they come to the relationship actually to give, to meet needs and those kinds of things. They do so freely. And a lot of people, and you guys may have done this, I don't know, I'm not judging, I've done it before, is you end up trying to control the relationship. And essentially to control the other person. You can't talk to this person. Why are you texting this person? Why are you going here for, a week? What are you doing? This and that. It's because we're fearful. And it's because we're trying to get the other person to change their life in order to kind of make our insecurities go away. So
Yeah.
that help us get to the root of the problem, right? So I ended up, there was a story that was conveyed to me about this guy that was dating this girl, and she went off to Canada, and she was gone. They've been dating for a while. It was serious, and she was gone for a month. And then she said that she wanted to stay for another month, and possibly for quite a while. Well, he got really pissed off, and like they kept fighting about it because he was worried that she was going to cheat on him with somebody that was there, and eventually they broke up over it. Now, when most people hear that story, they would probably say something like, "Well, she has no business running off," or that's her life. It's absolutely should be within her choice. And what was conveyed there was that he should have been supportive of her going if that's what she wanted. Now it feels counterintuitive, right? Because you want to control the person.
Yeah.
But what happens is when you give them that kind of freedom, they actually end up loving you more for allow them to become who they want to be, to live their life, and to cultivate the things that they want to experience. And it's not always going to include you. So they got back together and they worked through things. And he had worked on a lot of his problems like that. Well, she decided like a year later that she wanted to go back on that trip. And he was like, I feel like I need to put my foot down and tell her not to go. Well, he's reverting back into the same things that got him into this problem in the first place. What he should just support her going and deal with his own insecurities about it. So I went through a similar thing, and it was a case of when you get fearful that you're going to lose somebody, and that's what happens with a lot of guys is they get fearful they're going to lose their girl. Maybe she wants distance. Maybe she wants space and time to herself. Maybe she wants to go away for a month or whatever. And it feels counterintuitive because you want to control that and say, well, that's not right. But if it's right for her and we support that, then often what happens is they just love you more for being understanding and supportive of the things that they want in their life. So the love they have for you actually grows deeper and becomes more enriched through that process of giving them their autonomy, right? Yeah. So a lot of people really struggle with that because of fears and insecurities about loss. And at the end of the day, if somebody's like, well, what if this person cheats on me or does whatever? Well, here's the thing. If you're thinking that this is a person you want to spend your life with, don't you want to give them as much freedom as possible so that who they really are will be unveiled to you over time?
Yeah, for sure.
So she cheats on him. That's not the girl he needs to be with, right? If she doesn't come back from her trip from Canada ever, well, that's kind of a no-brainer. That's not the person he wants his life with. But when you give people the freedom to be who they really are, they're going to show you who they really are. And then you get to make a choice about, okay, this is the person that I want to be with. And people usually get that stuff backwards. So they try to manipulate and control and do and say all these things. And it's about their insecurities. And the other person ends up doing things to meet their needs, but they do it out of resentment and not because they want to give to that person. They love them. So a lot of, it's kind of that thing. And I think I wrote this yesterday on my post is the whole thing of like, you got to find your other person to become whole. It's like, it's so wrong the way that we approach relationships in that way is that you need to be a whole person first, and then the other person is a complement to your life.
I was just about to say that. Do you think that a lot of people are like, they're missing something and they're trying to find that in a relationship, trying to find like their identity in a relationship, rather than, as you say, like you should be cool with yourself and then you find the right partner that's an addition to.
Absolutely.
Life, right?
Yeah, and it's that's a great point, is that people often lose their identity in relationships, and then who they are and their whole life ends up becoming the relationship, right? Mm-hmm. And so now your happiness is completely dependent on how well you're functioning with your partner. And so if shit's not good with your partner, then you're going to be unhappy until shit's good. Now here's the thing. Then you start manipulating, controlling, and doing things to try to bring happiness in. Mm-hmm. And so once again, you're now taking away the other person's feeling that they're free and that they can live their life how they want to, right? So you just exacerbate the issue. It really takes two people who have worked on, becoming whole, happy. When I say happy, happiness is a byproduct of the process of kind of cultivating and creating the life that you believe that you want to have. And it's also kind of working through those insecurity issues and those kind of things. And when you get to that place and you can offer somebody a whole and complete great version of who you are, right? And they can do the same for you. So the relationship is really it's two healthy people who go to the relationship to give to it, not to take, not to control, not to manipulate, but to give to it and make each other's life better because they're in it. Now, it's true, you can have a great life and be completely alone, and you probably need to get to that place before you go out to try to bring somebody. Think about it, if you're I'm in a shitty place, but just had another person, well, you just bring another person into a shitty place, right? It doesn't seem very productive for that person. But people do that all the time. They're lonely and they're like, I need another person. And I do think that, we are a pair bonding species. So we do desire to have another person, but it's vitally important if we want to find what I consider the right, wrong person. I always say that because we all come with baggage and we all come with scars and we all come with all those things. But in order to find the right, wrong person, it's really important for us to be in the right place first so that we can offer them up. The other great thing about that is once you get there, you'll find that what you're attracted to often changes. So you take most men, we're visually wired, right? Yeah. And they look at a woman and they see a woman and they're like, okay, this woman is like 80% of everything physically that I desire in a woman, right? I mean, that's why there's women out there that post nothing but ass pics all day and have 10 million followers. What the percentage of that do you think sets men that's following those women out there?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's rarely other females that are going to buy something from them. It's dudes that just want to.
Yeah, they just want to double tap on. Yeah, that's a great.
You got it. Yeah,
and then slide into their DMs.
Slide into the DMs. Yeah,
trying to hook up. But that's why men will see a woman that they find attractive and say, "That's what I want." Know nothing about her, right? They don't know anything about her. And I almost feel like I've become more jaded as I've gotten older because there's so many beautiful women out there in the world, but it really, what about all the things in her life that has she cultivated in her own life and as a person? What has she worked on for developing those kind of things? What is she bringing to the table? And most guys will go in and say, this woman's really hot and they want to date a hot woman. And then they haven't cultivated a whole lot about themselves. So they run game on her, and their whole purpose is to try to sleep with her, right? It's living through sexual conquest and finding your identity as a man through your sexuality. So they go out and they if they're successful and they get with this woman that they find attractive, but it rarely lasts that way because you don't stay together for the right reasons. For example, like that you're compatible. That you're both in healthy places, that you both have an understanding of each other's needs, that you understand each other's love languages, and that you, like I said, you come to the relationship to give in order to meet those person's needs out of free will. So, like, we're just a big mismatch of problems, most often or not, when we come together with another person in a relationship because we just haven't taken the time out to figure out what in the hell is wrong with us.
Do you think this is a bigger problem now with the whole app culture?
Absolutely, man. And that's something I touched on a lot is if I could get off social media tomorrow, I would. For the simple fact that, now this runs counter to what I said earlier, but I'll tell you why. I believe for most people, and this is what I've seen, not for myself, but for most people, and I'm not saying that to put myself on platform. I run the gamut of hope. There's lots of hot women out there, message them, hook up with them. I went through that already in my life. Like it's an empty well, right? It is an empty well to just keep going back. Because here's the thing, that whole purpose, it serves a psychological need, and that's self-esteem. Like we seek out sex or we seek out time with somebody to meet one or two needs, sometimes both, and that's connection or self-esteem. And those are the two psychological needs that you end up looking for. A lot of people don't understand sex is not an actual need. You need water to live. You need food to live. You need air to live. Shelter comes in pretty handy too if the elements are bad. But you can actually go the rest of your life and never have sex, and you're not going to suffer any poor health problems because of it. So the psychological needs that they need are self-esteem and connection. So if you think about it, I read an article the other day, and the whole getting likes, getting attention online, it kicks off the dopamine, right? Yep. Every time your brain cannot distinguish the difference between getting likes and comments than it comes from in real life. So it kicks off dopamine. The people at Facebook actually worked with, I believe, a psychologist on this to develop the whole thing and knew when they were doing it, right? So it's an addiction. So my anecdotal evidence has been that when things get hard, and every relationship is going to come with dysfunction, right? Because I talked about earlier, we're all going to come with insecurities and attachments types, and we're not always going to be 100% as in regards to fixing them. We're probably going to be a work in progress for the rest of our life. You can get a handle on them, but the problem is everybody comes with dysfunction, and so once you first meet somebody and there's a connection and there's infatuation and limerence and all those things that make you feel amazing, it's a dopamine thing. And once that wears off, and you kind of start to see the person, for who they are, and all of their little idiosyncrasies start showing up, and yours do too. And again, once again, those attachment styles, the pain parts start rubbing up against each other. When it gets hard, a lot of people just check out, and then they're like, well, this other person is shooting me messages and they're attractive, so the grass will be greener over there. But you know what? Then people, they don't work through these problems. And every time you have dysfunction in a relationship, it's an opportunity for you to grow with that person.
I always say this to Akash. I say that people are always thinking the grass is greener. They don't water their own grass.
Not watering, and they're not fertilizing their own grass.
Yeah.
And that means themselves too, right? You really need to take care of yourself for the other person, right? I think there's a Winnie the Pooh meme I saw about that, as much as people like to post like these real in-depth memes. And it was something to the effect of, I'll take care of me to take care of you, and you take care of you to take care of me. Yeah. And that's really good, right? Like, take care of yourself, and that you'll take care of your partner kind of naturally. So, but I believe that what I see now, because people jump around more. I mean, the opportunity was there. Like, where I live, I mean, if you live out in like Western Kansas and you're like a farmer, you're going to hook up with that one girl from high school that you got the hot for. You're going to make it work with her come hell or high water, because there wasn't other options. But now with social media, somebody is with dating apps and social media and all those kind of things. Somebody else is just a message away.
It's 2018, isn't it? Like, everything's so accessible. I mean, just before this call, for example, Akash spoke to me and he's like, "Oh, we need to order a new mic, for the podcast." He's like, "Get the link over to me today. I've got Amazon Prime. It will be delivered by tomorrow."
Right.
It's the same thing. Like, you can just go on Tinder, you go on whatever.
Right.
You've got a date lined up within 3 days.
Exactly. So, now when you hit a point of dysfunction with the other person, which I don't know if you guys have ever heard of John Gottman. He's like the Michael Jordan of relationships. And I read his stuff all the time. And he talks about this, that every time we hit a place of adversity in a relationship, that is the point where we have the greatest opportunity for growth with the other person in the relationship, right? Mm-hmm. It's not when shit's going great. That's the kind of stuff that you get to enjoy, right? You get to enjoy you and the other person in a relationship when you're on the mountaintop. But you don't get to learn each other very intimately about who you are until you hit those valleys, right? Until you hit those really hard points. And when you hit the valley, that's a time when you get to know, where am I falling short in giving to this relationship? Or what is it this person is expressing to me that I'm not understanding? And that's a huge part of really growing together, is just understanding, coming to a place of understanding. And that's kind of a word that on the surface, it doesn't sound very deep, but understanding a person is exactly when people talk about communication, why communication is so important. It's really understanding, because if you've ever had a conversation with an emotional woman, you'll understand she could be doing a lot of communicating, but you may not understand a damn thing. Right?
Yeah.
It's really vitally important to understand. One of the things that I came to learn through this exercise I did with my now former wife, we're actually really great friends now, was we went through this exercise where she would say something to me, and then I had to repeat back to her what she had just said. And there were so many times when I'm repeating back to her, not what it was that she was trying to convey to me. Mm-hmm. And that's really eye-opening, how often we don't understand what the other person is trying to get us to understand. Yeah. And that's, somebody says something to you, it's going to mean something in your mind. They may have been in a completely different way. Now you're going to do something because you believe they did this, and then you do something, and then they take what you did or said in a way that you didn't mean. You see, and that's how you end up down the road to Shitsville.
Yeah.
So it's not a good time. It's not a good time, but it all those things give us an opportunity. Here's the opportunity. Like, if you're out for a vacation, with your significant other, and you're enjoying them, and you're taking her to Pound Town every night, you're drinking margaritas on the beach during the day, and, you're going shopping, you're learning what each other like and enjoy to a degree, you're building intimacy. But again, those times when you have a lot of strife and you have a lot of conflict, that's your opportunity to really grow with a person. And most people just want to check out on that now.
Yeah. The first sign of anything going wrong, and it's just, all right, on to the next one, rather than deal with the problem.
That's right.
Over to you, Akash.
Was the breakdown of your marriage the trigger for all this introspection, or did you have a lot of insight before it all happened?
I was just about to ask that. Like, what was the catalyst for you looking into this? Is this a recent thing, or was it the?
I've written about this stuff for a long time, but it's kind of like lifting, right, guys? So it's like, if you take a guy and he's gets interested in lifting, he reads a lot of stuff, and he kind of there's lifting and nutrition. It's very basic on the surface, but then depending on how deep you want to go, it can be a rabbit hole. Like I talked to Scott Steven quite a bit, and Scott talks about lifting at the level of the mitochondria. I mean, that's how far you can keep going down the rabbit hole, right?
Yeah.
So do you need to know it that far? Probably not. But it's kind of like when you talk about lifting at first and you're just getting involved and you're reading stuff. Well, if you were to go out and write some stuff about lifting, it'd be very amateurish, sophomoric learning. And then the more years that you put in, the more stuff you come to understand. And it's kind of like that. I have learned so much more as the years have gone by, not just through experience, because I've had a lot of experience with screw and shut up. Trust me, more than most. And you learn a lot through screwing shit up, right? You learn a lot through screwing up stuff in your training and in your diet and in life. That's where you learn most. I was a computer engineer for 15 years, and we didn't learn a lot about the systems when everything was running fine. We learned a lot when stuff broke because, you'd have downtime for 18, 20 something hours, and you have to get it fixed. And you learn so much during those times. You learn far more during those times than you learn when things were going right. So, yeah, I mean, my head thing has usually been this, and I was told this by somebody one time, and she said to me, she said, "You know more about relationships than anybody I've ever met in my life. So why do you fuck up so much?" And I said, "Well, that's because my application sucks." And she said, "Fair enough." So,
there's a lot of coaches like that in the fitness industry as well, funnily enough, isn't there? All knowledge, theory, but can't apply it.
Everything in life is that way. You've probably heard the term like knowledge is power, but that's absolutely not true, right? Like the average person knows to lose weight, not to stick, more food in their mouth.
Yeah.
But the application is the hard part, right? Like I can write any person a diet, absolutely will get them shredded over time, but the only power in it is their ability to apply it day in and day out. And that's what the power in everything in life lies for us, is that the truth is we pretty much contain most of the knowledge that we're ever going to need to get through life and function pretty normally. But usually it's the level of our application that's going to determine the degree of success that we attain as kind of we go through this whole thing.
I'm loving this. This is interesting. This is cool stuff. It's just completely different, to what we've spoken about previously on podcasts. So it's great. But
it's more, you guys usually more talk about like squatting and benching and like.
I've got an interesting question though. You talked about people having wrapping up their identity in their relationships. What is now that you've kind of gained this introspection, what does identity mean to you now?
I think that's something that's always evolving with each person, right? So, like right now, my identity, and it has been for a while because, I'm a single father. The huge part of my identity is trying to be a great father to my girls.
You got two girls, right?
I have 3 girls.
3, okay, yeah.
3 girls. My whole life has been one giant tsunami wave of estrogen, man. I had 2 sisters, no brothers. I had 3 daughters. So, I mean, clearly, like what you, something I wrote that was published at Teen Nation this morning in the roundtable, and kind of something I worked on the blog is everything that we pour a significant degree of our energy and emotions and ourself into are things that give us meaning. And meaning is so valuable because whatever it is that has significant meaning in our life is going to be a priority. And if something is a priority, then it's going to get a high degree of effort, infused into it. So your identity, you can look at how you're living your life each day and what you're pouring your energy and your time into, and that's going to reveal your identity to you. So your identity is really not a single conceptualized, compartmentalized concept. Really, it's something that the whole paradigm of it is kind of made up. If you would be looking at it more like a pie chart, right? So where is your time and your energy and your emotions and all of these things? What is it going into each day? And like my girls are a huge thing. Lifting is a huge thing. Writing is a huge thing. When somebody asks me what I do, I don't tell them that I'm a coach. I don't tell them that I work with IFBB pros or that I work with elite powerlifters or that I was a powerlifter or did bodybuilding or whatever. I always say I'm a writer because that to me is my identity in regards to that area of my life, is that I'm a writer and I love to write. I find writing is such a bigger part of who I am than anything else. The last years, another thing was the reclaiming of my faith and my spiritual walk in God and Christ. That's been a huge thing for me, and so I mean that's a huge part of my identity as well. So all these things get reshaped throughout the course of your life, right? Like you guys are in your 20s, but clearly who you were when you were say 18 years old is not the person that you.
Yeah, no, I'm completely different.
Right. And when you're 10 years from now, when you guys are in your mid 30s, you'll have a completely different identity again through experiences and through rearranging your priorities and where your level of effort is going. And that'll be end up what making up your identity. I think it's a part of your identity can clearly be investing into a romantic relationship with someone. I mean, I don't think there's any way to get away with it. I think the purpose is you don't want to lose your identity in the relationship, and that's different. And that's when you start changing who you are for the relationship. And that's what I came back to, making sure to keep and reclaim your autonomy at all times, and make sure you do the same for your partner. You allow them freedom, so that way you can truly be who you are. Because when you lose who you are in the relationship now, how you act's not going to be congruent with what the situation needs or what your partner even needs. Because again, you'll start delving into manipulation and control because of your insecurities.
Sure.
Perfect.
And you spoke about writing being a massive part of your identity. What process do you go through to get into deep kind of work state and produce great writing? Because I love writing as well, and I think writing is great.
So okay, well, you know what? This was an interesting conversation because I had this one with an author, and we were talking about it. One of the things is that prosperity is one of the worst things in your life for creative writing, right? Like if your life is going amazing, it is hard to write anything worth a shit.
Mm-hmm.
So it is for me. Now, it doesn't mean like I can't be having a good day and I write something that's cool, but when you are really in the doldrums and when, life is showing up at your doorstep each day for a massive crotch kicking that is going to take place, I can write and write and write and write. But when I'm doing amazing, and I talked to this with another author, he said, I'm the same way. He's like, when I have something that's really, that's heavy on me. He's like he goes, that's one of the best places to come out. And everybody's different. I don't know how you are. When writing stuff like training stuff is usually, it's more based on ideas or something to be conceptualized. So it'll be along the lines of, there's the training movement. Because like you put up the video of my PJR stuff, which thank you about that. I appreciate that. That's really cool. I still get blown away by that stuff even this day when somebody takes something I've done and they're like, hey, I saw Paul Carter do this or recommend it. It's awesome. To this day, I'm still like, that's so cool that you can do that, right? That's one of the cool things about social media.
Yeah.
But back to the writing stuff, I don't know how you are, but if it's an article on training stuff, how to say it? Like it's a little more sterile to me when I write it because I'm looking at either studies or I'm researching stuff or it's something that I've applied myself or I'm learning, what effect this is going to have, from people from either a performance standpoint or a growth standpoint or those kind of things. So it feels different. It feels very different than if I'm writing like a piece like we just spent like the last 20 minutes talking about. Because I'll go read stuff that is psychology based, but it even feels different when I'm reading it because there's the personal association with those things feels far greater, right?
Yeah.
So like if you're going through, you guys have been through like tough breakups with a girl before, right?
Yep.
Right. So, and if you go out, well, first off, when you go through a tough breakup, you listen to different music, you read different shit. You guys know what I'm talking about. Like,
of course,
talk about this, right? Like, men really struggle with this, and I'm cool with it, man. Like, I mean, I had one that I was talking to. You guys know who my best friend Sweet is, right? If you follow,
he came on one of the Geared Up episodes. Yeah,
absolutely. So Sweet is my homie. We're like this, and if we have the most amazing conversations behind closed doors. He's been going through a hard time lately too, and we're kind of each other's rock when we're going through tough stuff, and we've been through a lot of tough stuff together. And he said, he's struggling right now. I was like, it's okay, man. I was like, I had a day last week where I sat in my own driveway and cried my eyeballs out. And he's like, that happens to me all the time. And he's like, we're so gay. And just laugh. But like guys they don't want to talk about that, and that's why I talked earlier about men struggling in silence and men suffering in silence and those kind of things. And circling this back all around the writing. So when you're going through something like that, or whatever it is it really is impactful in your life, in the moment, in the present, when you're reading those things and you have deep association with that, and it has real context for you. Like you can probably feel that before when you've written before, Akash, is that it just pours out of you, right? Like you ever have that when you're writing and it just like flows?
Flow state.
Oh, it feels amazing, doesn't it? It's like one of the most amazing things you can feel, right?
Yeah. It's very therapeutic, yeah, when that happens.
And you can't explain it to people who don't have a passion for writing, but when you hit, and when you know when it's happening too, right? It's kind of cool. Like when you're writing, and man, it's just coming out. And I almost feel a little bit, I don't know what the right word is, but the fact that you kind of get to have that in your life, and somebody else doesn't really know that experience, like when you're writing, and man, it's just pouring out on the page, like colors, and like I don't know how you write. When you write, do you see your writing in like movie, or do you see the words on the page?
I try and convey a story to the reader.
Right.
So I wouldn't say I haven't thought about it as a movie before. No.
No, okay. So everybody's different. Everybody has different visualization stuff.
So do you think about it as a movie when you're doing it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, interesting.
I see movies in my head. Like I wrote the first writing that I ever did was I wrote a novel, and I didn't know. So this is a funny story too. So I had all these really what I thought were amazing stories in my head from the time I was like a little kid, and I would play these stories like in my head for like, so you're talking like 30 something years that I had these stories in my head. So when I was with my wife at the time, I was nobody was ever going to see it, but I was so scared to just write it. When you started writing, was there a lot of fear involved for you?
Oh yeah.
Like people don't get that either. Like there's so much fear at first, right? Yeah. You don't want anybody to see some shit you wrote. Like you don't want anybody to see what you wrote. So when I actually was telling her the stories and making her write it. Well, she's not a writer. She can't write anything, you know? And so finally, I told her, and like we were kind of arguing about it. Again, this is another parts where we do shit like behind closed doors that if anybody else saw, they're like, why aren't you just writing it? It was fear. Like I didn't want to write it. Like I was afraid I'd write it. It would just be horrific. So I just told her, I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it. And she's like, thank God. So I started writing, and I wrote the first chapter 974 times or something because it just wasn't perfect. And I was lucky enough that my neighbor had a degree in, I think it was journalism or something. I can't remember. And she said, just write it. It doesn't matter if it's perfect. If just write it and just keep writing. She's like, every author that's ever written an amazing book, the first drafts is not what you see when you pick up the book, right? So, and I already knew that, but when you're writing, it feels different. You want it to be perfect. You want it to be polished. So I was like, okay. So I just started writing. And like the whole book was all these scenes in my head, the way that I visualized it, like in a movie. And I would have days where I would write for like 9 or 10 hours nonstop.
Wow.
And I wrote it, and it took me more than a year to write it. And I think it was 200,000+ words.
Wow.
And it's a real novel, dude. It was, and I would write a chapter and read it to my kids. So it'd take me a few weeks to write a chapter, and I would read the chapter to my kids. They loved it. So I sent it a couple of years ago to a real editor, and she told me, like, she ended up calling me one day, and she's like, I was literally crying on the subway going to work this morning. Like, she's like, it was so addictive, but I've never taken it to a publisher, and I've never got to look at it. Yeah.
What genre is it? What would you classify it?
Fantasy action, man.
Yeah.
It's like Lord of the Rings type stuff.
Yeah, I find it fascinating how these fantasy authors, how these fantasy authors get the imagination for it. Like, where does it come from? When you when you watch things like Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, or Narnia, where does that? Is there some sort of brain connection that other people aren't quite?
I don't know. That was in one of my articles this morning. I'll probably post it up tomorrow. But you remember being like a little kid and you can play outside with your action figures and make up all these amazing stories with your action figures, like He-Man's kicking in the doors.
And you suddenly lose that spark.
It goes away, right? Like you
Yeah.
you ever sit down and try to play with like action figures like now as an adult? Like I had no idea what in the hell is going on. I actually still can't do it like to a degree. And I think that I could probably look it up and it's probably something I'll end up researching at some point because I was thinking about it this morning. But I do think that there's something that allows certain people, even when they get older, to kind of tap in to that kind of imagination part of the brain, just like they did as a kid, but then they can articulate it, in an adult fashion. And that's kind of what happened with my book. So that was like, my book was like, that was the first thing I ever wrote. Like the first thing I ever wrote was like a novel. It was I don't know how many pages. Like I said, it was more than 200,000 words. It took me more than a year. And then I figured out I loved writing, right? I really love writing. Like you said, it's such an amazing outlet and it's such a great coping mechanism. And so I started writing I started the blog, and it was like nobody saw it. Like I was just writing on it. I was posting my own little articles, right? And so nobody was reading it or whatever. But I was friends with me and Jim Wendler are friends, and Jim was in the middle of writing 531. Like the first one.
Yeah.
And we would exchange emails about training ideas. And so this is, I think I've written about this before. Jim's even posted about it. But we decided to settle on one, because we were exchanging so many emails, we decided to settle on one email reply and we make no new emails. And so we have this email chain that's more than 1,100 emails back and forth with all these training ideas. I'm sure people would be willing to make money for them. While he was developing 531, while I was going over all my ideas. So I was writing these articles at the time, and I would say, hey, Jim, like, read this and tell me if you like it. And he would write back, go, dude, this is awesome. He's like, this is better than anything I'm reading anywhere. He's like, do you want elite? Like, do you want to run this up the chain and give it, we'll publish it for you. I was like, hell no. I was terrified, right? I didn't want anybody to read what I was writing. I was cool with Jim reading it. Yeah. I didn't want anybody else. And he stayed after me because I'd write another article and post it. He's like, dude, just let me run this up. And if just let them publish it. So I finally relented. And then overnight, they published it. They threw out a link to the blog. Overnight, I went from literally I remember looking at the graph, in the analytics.
Yeah.
Flat across for months. And it just spikes straight up for traffic.
Yeah.
And, it's crazy because, I remember my boss at the time, I was a computer engineer. He asked me what I was doing one day. I was writing on the blog, clearly making the most out of my work time.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. When you have downtime, there really isn't anything to do. So he asked me, what are you doing? I told him, I'm just writing on this blog. I kind of do it as a side business now. And I remember this, and he looked at me and he said, you ain't never going to make no money off no blog.
Oh, wow. He's eating his words now.
Yeah. So, it was never that thing where it's I'm going to prove you wrong or whatever, but it was just something that stuck with me because I did never intend to make any money off the blog. I never intended to get anything that I wrote published. I never intended for any of those things to happen. And I get people all the time ask me, they're like, well, how do I do what you did, or how do I get, more visibility in the fitness community or whatever? And I'm like, dude, I don't know, because that was never my goal. I wanted to write, and I liked writing about training ideas or modalities, or I like just writing about stuff life stuff in general. And I didn't have a motive. If your motive, and Charles Poliquin and I have talked about this quite a bit, Charles always says, don't chase money, chase education and knowledge. Because if you chase education and knowledge and you do something you really love, at some point the money will come.
He has that phrase, doesn't he? The more you, what was it? The more you learn, the more you earn.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so when people set off, think about this, kind of what we talked earlier about relationships and control and manipulation. So when people set off, and of course, I'm not saying it doesn't happen for some people, because clearly if you become business minded, you've got to be strategic in the things that you do and your moves and that kind of stuff. Absolutely. But for people who are struggling, people ask me, this is the one question that comes up. I'm kind of all over the place now, but I'll try to reel it in. So people ask me something like, well, how do I do what you do? And I'll say, my first question is, and Akash will appreciate this. I'll say, do you love to write?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, I like writing. I'm like, no. Do you love to write? Do you have a passion for writing? And they're like, well, and I'm like, that's a no. Because like if I ask you, Akash, you have a passion for writing, right? Like it's a thing in your life. And I do too. And anybody that's going to get visibility is going to either have to be good in front of a camera, making videos, and have some ingenuity there, or they're going to have to be a great writer. That's our two mediums.
Well, it's funny you're saying this, because when Akash and I set up RNT, we committed to trying to write X amount of articles per week. Now, Akash loves writing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind it. Like I've written an article on don't fuck up your peak week, which got published in Flex magazine. And I've done a couple of little things, but Akash can sit and write every day. Whereas I might get like one idea that I'm really passionate about. Like when I see people screwing up their peak weeks, and I'll go all in on that. That's me done for like 3 months. And then seriously, I don't get a buzz out of writing itself. It's there'll be a problem that I see, and then I think, right, okay, I can write about that. But it's sporadic. And the issue I had was towards the tail end of last year, Akash noticed that, my content had dried up. Like it was crap. I was taking photos of, just a tub of EAAs and just mention that.
I can help with that. So one of the things that I learned about, I read about this author who had written, he'd written like 75 novels. And he was asked by another best-selling author before this guy became a bestseller. He's like, how did you write so many books? And he said 200 shitty words a day.
Mm.
He's like 200 shitty words. Now, here's the interesting thing about that. And Akash, you've probably done this before. You sit down and you're like, I'm going to write about this, but I don't know where it's going to go. And you haven't really kind of fleshed out the entire concept of it. But you just start writing, and the next thing you know, you've written like 3,000 words. How many times that happened to you?
Oh, yeah, all the time, yeah.
So the act or process of just starting an action often continues the action. And so for people who like, I love to write, but I don't know what to write or don't know how to start, if you just write 200 shitty words is nothing.
Yeah.
If you write 200 shitty words every day, and you continue your 200 shitty words, that's a novel every few months, right? Mm-hmm. So depending on how big the novel is, but at least a novel a year. And so, but once you start and you just make a discipline to write 200 words a day, more times than not, those 200 words will become a few thousand. Mm-hmm. Another best-selling author that I know that runs like a writing class, and this is such a weird concept to me, and that is one of the things they would do is it was a similar kind of discipline, was they had to write for 20 minutes a day. Like every day I had to write for 20 minutes. Like, okay, so here's the thing. You're in a writing class because you want to be a writer, and somebody's having to force you to write 20 minutes a day. To me, those things
doesn't make sense.
Because now if you're in the writing class because you want to learn how to become a better writer, I think most writers would become better writers by just reading a lot of books and understanding writing styles and flow and those kind of things. But clearly writing more helps you with that as well. But if you want to be a writer, and I've heard that so many times, is that what guys who are teaching other people how to write, what they struggle with is just putting in the time to write themselves. And there's no substitute for that. It's kind of like this. It's like if you want to build a better body and somebody's like, you have to get to the gym. They're like, how do I build a better body? Well, you got to start with actually getting in the weight room, right?
Yeah.
So whether it's going to be 30, if it's just 30 minutes a day, every day, that's still, you can build a great body in a couple of years, lifting 30 minutes a day, 4 or 5 days a week, especially if your diet is tight. But it's the time that you put in that accumulates over this, it gets extrapolated over this period of time that builds a whole foundation. That's everything in life, right? Like lifting, your relationships, your writing, whatever it is that you're doing is like the time that you're putting in, whether it's 20 minutes a day, whether it's whatever, that's how you develop and cultivate those things.
Do you have your own magic time that you have in the day? Is there a specific time or ritual you use, or?
No, you know what? Like, when do you find there's a specific time of day that it flows out more?
Yeah, for me, it's between 6 and 9 in the morning.
Yeah, for me too. Like, that's about right for me too. And yeah, about 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning, it's like your brain's like really turned on for creativity, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I found. And I also found it's before everyone kind of wakes up and before the emails start coming in. And it's the only time of the day I can completely switch off from email, WhatsApp, everything.
Yeah, so the first thing I do when I get up in the morning is I have my white space. What I call my white space is time where I don't pick up my phone, I don't open my laptop. I do my devotional, give that time to God, and I write in a journal. I actually write, not type. I don't want to open a computer, but I actually write in a journal. My handwriting sucks, but I do it because it feels more therapeutic. There's a little more. It's a little more effort, right, than just typing.
Yeah.
So, but then I'll open my laptop at that point, and whatever I'm going to write, it always flows out in the morning better. I also find, I don't know if you noticed this, even when you're in that zone and it's flowing out, you ever hit that wall? You just don't know where to finish the article from there, and you come back to it later. You have those.
Yeah, so what I do, I go for a walk then.
Yeah, you got to step away from it. You can't try to finish it when you're in that mode because it'll be shit.
Yeah.
Shit.
That's exactly what you mean, yeah.
And then you go back and read it later, like, this is shit. It started off amazing. I don't know what the hell happened. And sometimes I've just gone back and just like highlighted and just deleted a whole section. And then I'll come back to it the next day. Like always coming back to it the next day, it's amazing as you're reading it, what your brain turns on for creativity the next day, right? You've had that happen to you before.
Yeah, so I mean, this morning I was writing an article for PDTC. And I was that period where you just can't get into it. So I'd written about a couple of hundred words, but it just wasn't flowing right. So then I went for a walk. I did 20 minutes of power walking, just get the heart rate up. And then I came back and then I just punched out 2,500 words within an hour.
Exactly. That's a great feeling, right? Yeah, that's like the best feeling ever. It's like you get stuck, man. And I've hit that wall. Like the article I published today, honestly, I could probably go back and redo it, but it was so long I don't want to. But it's just on the blog, so I'm okay with it. Although I shouldn't be. I should be. When I'm writing for a publication or a magazine or whatever, I'm far more. I try to be far more kind of more polished. So I'll take a lot of runs, a lot of re-edits back in an article. So I just write it all first, and then I just step away for a day or two, and then come back to it over and over again.
Do you send it to anyone else, or do you have people that you have to objective eye on it, or?
Mm-mm. No, I just write it and then I edit it and then I send it. I mean, it gets edited most of the time, no matter where I send it. They always have editors first. So yeah, I just do my own editing most of the time. It comes out like that. Although it bothers me sometimes when I see my work that's edited and I like the edit and I'm like, damn it, why didn't I think of that? Because that's a really creative sentence to put in there. So that's the only time that it bothers me. When they change it all around altogether, which happens sometimes, I don't really care. As long as it kind of flows, like with the ideas, or principles within a piece. But it's what bothers me is when they put in a sentence or add something to it that I think is really awesome. I'm like, damn it, I should have thought of that. That's what bothers me.
So obviously you've written the novel. You're also known mainly for doing like your training articles, but you've also just recently published a new book, right?
Yeah.
Which is this is now from what I gather, it's more aimed at the older guys, intuitive eating, trying to teach habits as opposed to your very strict, bodybuilding, regimented stuff and health advice. Talk us through it.
Oh, did you guys actually peep it?
I haven't had a look at it yet. No.
Oh, because you really hit on it. Like, so the last few years of my training, I went over this a little bit in Duffin's podcast. After coming out of a decade of powerlifting where my training was super structured, and that's the way I competed. I used a lot of linear periodization, and I really liked that. And when I switched over to my bodybuilding show, I trained in a more structured fashion. But when I came out of the show, I was just kind of burnt.
Yeah.
And I still was going to train, but I wanted to go in and just do what I wanted to do and not be kind of tied down to like meeting this training criteria. So really for a long time, I just did what I wanted to do. And then after a while, I kind of started craving that structure again. So I sat down and I said, I'm going to create out. I already created out the, what I call the accumulative volume training, which bodybuilding.com did a whole video and photo shoot and everything on their pay site. And they had me out there for that. And I've been training using accumulative volume training, it was kind of a concept that I designed. None of this is new. It's always based on concepts we already know.
Can you just break that down? What this accumulative?
Cumulative volume training. Well, when I went into the gym, I wanted to get in and out of the gym fast, but we worked.
Mhm.
And so, for example, like I'd go in, and if it was like leg press day, I'd start with like, with some leg curls. And then if I was going to do like leg press after that, I didn't want to do a set, hang around, put some plates on, do a set. So I just put a plate on, do like a set of 12, stand up, put another plate on, jump back down. And there was no rest.
Mhm.
So I did a set of 12. And I was in and out of the gym in 30 minutes, but I'd be totally like, just, all the fibers would be like completely stimulated, and I felt good, but because you're building that fatigue as you're adding weight, you don't end up getting really super heavy on your sets, but they're hard. And that was the other thing I liked, because I found I wasn't as it's more of a type of metabolic stress than looking for mechanical tension or progressive overload. So I wanted to get away from progressive overload, and I had for a long time. I mean, that's like the whole thing that you do in powerlifting. There's like progressive overload, more, or just moving the bar with more speed. So I really loved it. And I'd get in, I could blast something really fast with just like a movement or two. And then, so I kind of started developing the modalities based around that concept, and then just training 3 days a week around it. And I really liked it. And then I did months and months of it. And then as you guys know, like all training, like styles or whatever, like after a while, you need something a little different, mainly for like mental stimulation.
Yeah.
So I went back to just doing like some basic linear periodization and reducing my movement training in a little bit more of a minimalistic fashion. A back day doing like pull downs, some rack deads, some shrugs, and, kind of getting in and out.
Mhm.
So I just sat down and just designed the intensities that I wanted to see each week in a short, like a little short, like 4 week span. And so I thought, why don't I just stack these two together? So, you're going to have your first 4 weeks where you're kind of running a cool little linear periodization program. And then that's going to transfer over into doing some accumulation. So the first 4 weeks are based around progressive overload, mechanical tension, and all of those modalities that have to do with inducing growth. And then the next 4 weeks is based around metabolic stress. So you're using, your two main principles that we know exist for stimulating hypertrophy. But we're also doing some stuff in there, like some strength work. But also, one of the things is so many training programs and ideas now, after a few weeks, start really overloading people from an autonomic nervous system standpoint, where you're constantly having to get up for session after session after session. Mm-hmm. And physically, you may feel okay, but you're just tired, and mentally you feel drained. And I call it the difference between being full and being hungry. When you're hungry, it means you want to go to the gym. And you ever been in the gym?
Yeah, you lose that drive.
Yes, and you're like, I don't even want to put a plate on. Yeah, and that's what I call being full. So I wanted to stay away from really overtaxing, you turning on the sympathetic nervous system too much, and that was why I like the kind of the linear periodization part of the program is just 4 weeks, and then you go to a metabolic stress type where it tends to have, I found, a little bit less of a systemic taxation on you. So your systemic and overall recovery isn't really kind of taxed as much as when you're doing a lot of heavy weights and you're having to really get up for those things.
Yeah. Interesting. Talking about training and like this style, your own training, right? What's the most that you weighed at one point in time? What's the biggest? Because you've taken you've accepted, haven't you? What's it? Sorry,
what?
You broke up a little bit there.
What was the most I ever weighed while all the years I was training?
Yeah, because you've now taken like a back seat almost, haven't you? In that you're a lot lighter. I mean, you look great. I looked at your Instagram feed earlier, right?
Sexy, I know.
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah. Is that because partly, we've been talking about you becoming like secure in yourself and so on? Is that anything to do with it? You're always chasing sight. That's the reason why I asked, what's the most you've weighed? Like, what was the turning point? Like, why are you now comfortable with where you're at? Is that because of the work you've been doing psychologically? So going back to what we talked about earlier, I'm trying to sort of...
I think a lot of both, right? Some guys never get rid of that, needing that exterior shell of like getting affirmation about how huge and this and that. Yeah. That went away from me quite a few years ago. and I really wanted to get in great shape. And like the physiques I looked at now, like the mass monsters that I grew up looking at when I was young and I admired stuff, they really turned me off now. I'm like, I would never want to look like that. Mm-hmm. And like I look at, it sounds funny, but like I look at a physique like Chris Hemsworth had in like Thor. I think he looks great. Like that's what I think most guys probably wouldn't be pissed off if they look like Chris Hemsworth in Thor, right? Like,
of course.
But now I really gravitate more towards I love being in shape and doing condition. Like nothing feels better than being able to go out and do like 10, 100-yard sprints and not even feeling winded. Like that feels amazing.
Yeah.
Willer and I used to talk about it all the time. And so there's definitely, you kind of hold on to that for a lot of guys, or at least I know it happened for me. You hold on to that thing for a long time. You do find your identity, right? We talked about this. You kind of find your identity in being big and what consider like swole, like you find your identity in that. So you have to be able to let go if you want to become something more than that, then allowing that to define you. And there's so many guys that allow what they look like to wholly define who they are, because people often measure their degree of self-worth about how they think other people see them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right. I mean, we have every day we wake up to that with social media, right? Like, so if you have, 300,000 followers, well, clearly you're more valued than I am. Right. So we are really living this really distorted world now because of social media. Yep. But the perception of who you are for a lot of guys, it does get lost in lifting. Right. So it can get lost in any number of things. Some people lose it in relationships. Some people lose it in what they look like. I mean, that's not uncommon. It's a very common thing. And in the fitness industry, it's a huge thing. Like you get lost in what you look like. So for me, for all those years I was powerlifting, it was, man, I love being huge. I love people like freaking out when I walk into the grocery store. Because when I was 290 pounds, that happened all the time.
Yeah.
And so.
So how tall?
5'11". 5'11". Yes, I was 5'11", 290. So yeah,
pretty big.
I was big. Yeah, I was big, but
just for people listening out there, if they haven't seen Paul, like he's still not a small guy, okay?
Yeah, and that's funny. My former wife tells me all the time. She's like, "You're so skinny and small now."
No, no.
I'm like, I don't care. Like because she was with me all those years, where I was between 275 and 290. That was how she viewed me for the longest time. And I think even some of her identity about me, was lost in what I looked like in that way. Mm-hmm. And so when I decided, I got some blood work done back. It basically said I was going to die within the next 14 minutes. And, I was like, well, I might want to clean my shit up. So I started dieting and getting my life in order. And
do you mind just quickly touching on, just because I'm a bit of a geek like this, were there any specifics with the blood work that you can remember?
It was funny. I remember that my HDLs were something like 7.
Okay.
And I remember the doctor telling me my blood work didn't look possible. Like,
oh shit.
And I remember my total cholesterol was like, it was like 260. It was like 267, and my HDLs were 7.
Fuck.
It was something nuts like that, or 14. It was really, really, really low. And my triglycerides were like through the roof. Of course, at the time, because I think I was taking D-ball and something else when I had my blood work done, which makes for a fun blood work panel.
Yeah.
It was because that's when I was competing in powerlifting, and I wanted to get my blood work done when I was absolutely going full out on gear. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, you get these guys that they come off of it, wait a couple months, and then that's not a true representation, because you spend more of the year on. You need both. Yeah,
you need both. You need it. That's why you need it every couple of months. But I just remember, God, there were so many things. My test levels were good. They were good. I remember those were good. They were really high. In fact, they were off the charts. I couldn't even measure them. So I just feel like an absolute Brahma bull during those days when you're taking that much test. I mean, really, you just cannot bang enough. So yeah, he's like, well, your testosterone levels are good. And I remember him looking at me. I was like, what?
That's the shock.
And yeah, I was like, the deal, fam. So it was, my blood work wasn't good, but I remember I had this kind of epiphany. I was at a meet. I wasn't competing. I was just went there to see some friends, and I was walking across the parking lot to go back to the hotel, and I couldn't finish walking across the parking lot. I had to lean up against the car and stop.
Shit.
And I thought then, it's like, this is ridiculous.
Mhm.
Like, I remember my low back was pumped and my shins were killing me. And I was like, man, this is really bad. Because I was an athlete for most of my life. And I played football and baseball. I did martial arts for a long time. I was used to being in shape, but I didn't realize how long I've been out of shape.
Mhm.
And that's why, like, people are chasing pounds in the bars, man, like, just consistently. Like, it's just amazing how out of shape most of those guys are. I mean, you have to do one rep. Think about it. You do one rep. So you have what kind of shape you got to be in to do one rep.
Yeah.
So,
What are the top 3 things that you did to change course? Aside from drop the dose.
Yeah, I mean, getting off, I didn't, like, when I say get off, like, the only time I blasted any gear, and honestly, like, I've had so many conversations with, like, world record holder powerlifters.
Uh-huh.
Like, I never came close to what those guys were taking.
Yeah.
Like, even, like, I can remember taking, like, 1,500 milligrams of test a week, which is a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't use tren. Like, all the guys that are at that elite level, like, they take, I mean, almost all those guys take tren.
Yeah.
That's where strength really comes from. The ability to either withstand tren or just deal with it or whatever. I couldn't take it.
That's what they say, defines the top bodybuilders as top powerlifters, isn't it? Those that can handle the side effects of the higher doses and the harsher compounds.
Like, if any guys hear this and they don't like it, fine, get off trend and go replicate your lifts.
Mhm.
You know, I'm serious. I think Donnie Thompson and I talked about this one time. There's so many guys that don't want to admit that. Now, and I've said before, I think the same guys would be at the top, but I don't know if I believe that as much anymore. I think it's just like bodybuilding, right? It really comes back to the genetics part. Is the only genetics part about bodybuilding that matter is that those guys respond to drugs way differently than the rest of the population, and that's what people understand.
Well, I remember, I think it was John Meadows actually put up some blood work of his like total and free testosterone, and there seems to be a correlation with the guys, at the top level, that their free testosterone is just that much higher than, like you and I.
Yeah,
that we convert it, aromatize it and whatever, and it's bound.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I actually.
That's a huge genetic factor.
My estrogen levels, I tend to convert tests at a really low rate. Like, I don't convert tests at a high rate, but that's probably also why I could get away with taking less doses or less anabolics than other guys. When I say anabolics, I'm talking about stuff like I didn't take tren. I found that I could take NPP. And which is the short ester for DECA.
Yep.
And I couldn't take DECA. DECA would give me horrific anxiety. But and some people will say, because now there's going to be somebody that listens and say, well, DECA and NPP
are the same drug, but no, it's
like, okay, dude, I'm telling you from experience, the delivery method, the ester absolutely matters. If you don't think so, take a week and blast 2 grams of test probe and then blast 2 grams of test enanthate and see if the test enanthate, if you're not bloated like a frog, whereas the test probe, you're pretty much not going to carry much water at all, because with that slow ester, you tend to have higher conversions in your system longer, so your estrogen tends to rise more. With the short esters, it gets in and out of the system really fast.
Yep. Agreed.
So the side effects to do with the esters so with like DECA, over time I would start having horrific anxiety. With NPP, nothing. Like, I felt great. So I would go, my go-tos were like test and NPP and D-ball and Anadrol. So I would only run NPP for 6 weeks, and I don't remember the dose. I think, like, when I was competing, it might have been 400 milligrams a week. And
nothing crazy then.
No, and I would take tests in pretty good amount. Usually a gram of tests a week whenever I was getting ready for a meet, and I would start a gram of tests a week, probably 8 weeks out, and I would throw in NPP about 6 weeks out, and I would take about 400 milligrams. And then I only took orals 3 weeks. I didn't take orals. I only took orals 3 weeks, and I would take 50 milligrams of D-ball a day. And then sometimes I would throw 50 milligrams of Anadrol a day on top of that. But
it's like a synergistic effect to those, right?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. They compound on one another. So that was it. That was all I ever did. And I remember talking to a guy who was a world record holder at the time, and he told me, he's like, they don't give you a trophy for biggest total with lowest dose.
It's true.
Yeah, he was taking quite a few grams of just orals a week.
Wow.
And I just, I just couldn't, man. Like, I just I couldn't handle like the side effects.
Yeah.
And I always subscribe to the theory that if you're having to take more drugs, if you're having to take more side effect drugs than you're taking good drugs, what we call good drugs here, if you take more side effects than you're taking good drugs,
there's a problem.
Pull something back.
Yeah. Definitely.
So, I mean, that was kind of, but going back to all that, yeah, that was the thing, was that I pared everything back to just taking a replacement dose of test.
Yeah.
And get blood work done to figure out what the replacement dose was. Just where I stayed in a good range, kind of the top, of average, which is, right around, like, was it 1,800? Is it 1,600 or 1,800, for test? I think that's right. And so I paired it back to that, and I didn't even care if it dropped, because even if you're running, say, people freak out about this stuff, but if you're running 650 test, like if your test levels come back to like 650, 800, that's plenty.
Yeah, it's more than enough still. Yeah,
it's plenty. Yeah, it's more than enough. So yeah, I got off all this stuff, and like I said, I didn't run a whole lot. Pretty much the only time I ran stuff was about 8 weeks out from the show or competition. But really just stopped eating like a complete asshole.
Okay.
I mean,
so step one was, you weren't taking a lot, but step one was reduce that. Step two was the food. Any health supplements that you would recommend? I mean, like you part of your book is obviously, now that you're getting older and so on. I know you say I'm only 28, but fucking 2 years I'm 30. Like, what sort of health supplements?
What you do now means all the preventative stuff that you do now is going to pay off massive dividends for you by the time you're my age.
Yeah.
Perhaps a good question would be, if you could turn back the clock to when you're in your late 20s, what would you tell us?
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. So, it all depend on your goals, right? Like, number one, I would have gotten on drugs sooner.
Mm-hmm.
Because after about the first 5 to 7 years of your training, you're pretty. If you've been training hard for 5 to 7 years, you're pretty much going to be maxed out genetically.
Yeah.
I would have gotten, a lot of people were like, did he just say to get on drugs sooner? Yeah, I would have gotten on drugs sooner because I trained 20 years completely natural.
You're 20 years now. Wow. Okay.
20 years. A lot of people, I don't know, a lot of people know that. A lot of people look at me now and are like, well, some of this just takes a lot of drugs. I'm like, I've never taken a lot of fucking drugs. I've never taken a lot of drugs. Like, I trained natural for 20 years. That's why I developed all my knowledge, right? Like, that's why I learned how to train properly and how to train hard, because I had to maximize those things. But I probably would have gotten on drugs after I've been training for 7 to 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have really maximized the training knowledge, and that's what I did, right? Was people asking me, well, are your routines okay for natty? I'm like, they have to be, because everything I developed was through 20 years of being natural.
Interesting. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, so I was natural, completely natural. I never even took the pro hormones.
Wow.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What was the heaviest you got up to, natural?
258 pounds.
Blimey.
Shit.
I think I might have seen the picture on your blog back in the day of that.
Back in the day, I have a picture, even now.
You're doing DC training, right?
I did, yeah. You remember the picture? Dude, I was big. I was a big natural guy. Like, I didn't think so then, but I was 258 pounds. Not like, I looked like off-season bodybuilder. Like, I was very off-season bodybuilder looking this, but I was, dude, I ate. I knew how to eat. I knew how to train. Like, that goes so much further. Like, a lot of these guys, they just don't know how hard you have to really train.
Yeah. So just touching on, just because I find this an interesting side of things.
So, like, I would have got on drugs probably at 7-year mark. I would have never gotten fat. I would have stayed lean all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Very lean all the time, like I do now. There's really, John Meadows and I talked about, John doesn't think that you really have any business ever getting over 8 or 9% body fat.
Interesting.
And the other thing that I absolutely know about that now is when you're leaner, you really create a more ideal physiological environment for increasing lean muscle tissue at a much more efficient rate, because you tend to stay far more insulin sensitive. Mm-hmm. And while, like, we know now, like, insulin isn't the boogeyman for getting you obese, but the more insulin sensitive you are, the better your nutrient partitioning is going to be, which means that the rate that your body's shuttle your amino acids, your carbohydrates, and all those things into the cells will be far more efficient. And learning about
I know it's minimized a bit because of the calories in, calories out thing. But honestly, and I wrote about this in the Super Soldier Protocol, learning how to manipulate your carbohydrate consumption based around just peri and post workout. And outside of that, like I had some when you guys watch, but it's literally half a cup. I kind of do that, like you said earlier, off in intuitive eating. So, but mainly all the carbs coming either pre, peri, post, and that's it. And the rest of the time, it all just being like high quality protein, and vegetables, and then a little bit of good fats. Yep. So that's really how I have most guys eating. It works really well for pretty much everybody. So training wise, one of the things that is coming out, Akash, in an article I just did where I looked at a lot of studies, we're talking about deloading. And one of the studies I looked at was interesting. It was where they resistance trained men trained for 6 months, and they looked at the graph. And so one group trained consistently the whole 6 months, and the other group would train for 6 weeks and 3 weeks detrain completely, no training. Yep. And then 6 weeks training, 3 weeks detraining. At the end of the 6 months, they both had the same results.
Oh wow!
So like this whole, like, I got to train. I know there's some people out there that preach like maximum volume that you can do, like, push the envelope. You're going to end up in the same place more. Like, it's kind of like creatine, right? So if you load creatine, which I believe like that's the best way to kind of saturate the cells, like do the loading phase for 4 or 5 days where you're doing 20 grams of creatine a day.
Yep.
For 4 or 5 days. Well, what we know though is if you're just taking 5 grams of creatine a day, after a couple of weeks, you're going to stay saturated, right? So you end in the same place.
But option A just gets you there a little bit quicker.
Gets a little quicker, but ultimately you end up in the same place. And then I think what you look at when you extrapolate like 2 variables, even for just you as a person, if you could take your twin like in another dimension, and you're like really pushing the envelope for training. You're training 5 days a week. You're training as much volume as you can handle. You're blasting yourself into outer space, and your other self is training 3 days a week. Doing a couple of hard sets. Good quality sets, but leaving a couple of reps in the tank. Like this guy that was really doing the hard, like all out shit. He can barely recover, or he can recover from it just barely. Like he's going to have that upward curve, but it's going to do like this, right? Mm-hmm. And this guy is going to it's going to be more slow, but this is what's going to happen over that long period of time. You're going to end up in the same place. So what's the point in going in to the gym 5 days a week, 6 days a week, pouring on all the volume, when you're going to end up in the same place 6 months if you're just consistently training 3 days a week, putting in good quality work? And
the guy you said who's doing 5-6 days a week, he's probably going to get injured, burnt out.
Injured, man. Like, he's probably going to get it. If anything, the more often you walk into the gym, the higher it's kind of like the pool in your backyard. Instantly, your percentages for drowning go up. So, so the guy who goes to the gym 5 or 6 days a week, his percentage for getting injured clearly going to be a lot higher than the guy that's getting in working, 3 days a week. That's the other thing is training to failure. What we know from every study we see now is that leaving a couple of reps in the tank stimulates either strength or hypertrophy pretty much to the same degree as really training to true muscular failure. And yet true muscular failure has an enormous more impact on recovery debt than leaving a reps.
This is something that Akash and I talk about all the time. It's a game changer for us is not hitting failure, leaving that rep or 2 in the tank and just continually just notch the weight up each week.
Yeah, I mean, Paul, you talk about the workout hangover quite a lot, right?
Yeah.
It's exactly that.
Absolutely. And workout hangover, that's why, and Meadows and I have different opinions on this. John is like, if you feel good, go for it. And I would rather not be debilitated for the next 2 or 3 days following because I have to write. I got to manage my kids. I'm a single dude right now. I could have a lady in my life again soon. But I have to, clean my house. I remember getting ready for my bodybuilding show. I was so exhausted. When I was getting ready for my show, I was so exhausted, man. Like, I didn't wash clothes sometimes for 2 or 3 weeks. And so, like, I would rather go in, I'm putting in a really quality work, but not destroying myself. And why is John destroying himself anymore? You know, I mean, he's 70 years old. I always talk about John. 70 years old. He's not going to change what he looks like now. But I mean, he loves training that way, and that's why. That's more of a he loves that.
He's just got that passion, hasn't he, for it? Yeah,
absolutely. I love that he has that passion. I just don't anymore. And I've had that conversation with so many guys that have been training as long as I have, and I'm like, I will figure out now at this point to be every way that I can be more efficient with my time in the gym, so I can still have really good, high quality workouts. But I'm in and out at 30. I reduce movements. I don't feel like anymore like my shoulders are going to fall off and shrink if I don't do 20 sets of side laterals or whatever. And all I really care about anymore is having big traps and a good ass. I mean, that's really what my physique goals have kind of been boiled down to. As long as as long as I'm yoked from the back or the front, and like girls like look at my butt, think I have a good butt for a dude. Like that's pretty much about it anymore. And like keep abs. Like that's it. Like I've become a total narcissist when it comes to my body as far as that goes. But and Pekulski and I talked about this. Being Pekulski and I talked about this, and he retired from bodybuilding, and we had this conversation on his show. And I was like, "Don't you just really just care about being sexy anymore?" He's like, "Absolutely, dude." He goes, "I don't care about anything more." He goes, "I want to look good, and I want to be able to bang my wife really good." Because that's all I care about anymore. I don't have a wife to bang anymore, but I want to look good, so I increase my potential chances for possibly acquiring a wife at some point in the future.
You're working on your best self.
Say what?
You're working on your best self.
I'm working on my best self now. You know, that's why I don't have a lady. Well, I don't have a lady because I was not my best self, and her and I, we had some really horrific fights, and it's one of those things. I don't know, like, she's gone for good. I hope not, because I probably love her more than I've ever loved anybody else in my entire life. And I know like the fighting and arguing took a toll, and I know she's hurt. But and that's why it's important now. It's like if we ever come back together or want to talk, I need to be in a different place than
yeah.
And that's why it's vitally important. Guys get freaked out. They're like, "I'm gonna lose to somebody else." I'm like, well, that's how life goes sometimes. And if that happens, then and I take this time to work out, then the purpose that she may have served in my life was the catalyst for me working on myself to be better for someone else.
You're a big fan of every relationship that you get into. You learn something from it. You make fuck ups, but you grow each. We were talking about this in Tampa, weren't we, Akash? That
be specific about that. It's like I said earlier. Every time that you mess up, you get into relationships. Each one serves an opportunity to help you grow if you can be introspective enough about why the relationship broke down and what your part in it was. Right?
Yeah.
But so many people come away from relationships and they have trouble being introspective. They have trouble understanding their problem dynamic, right? They have trouble understanding what it was that they contributed to the problems in the relationship. So when you get those people who can't be introspective enough to say, this is what I brought to the table that caused this carnage, they will repeat that.
Yeah, they go around in circles.
Over and over and over again. They will consistently blame the other person, never be introspective enough to take fault in their part in the problem dynamic. When they go to the next person, they'll cast themselves as a victim. I've been there before. I've been open about this. Like I was faithful to my wife for 17 years, and I had an affair. And when I had the affair, me and my wife, we're such an amazing friends and co-parents now. But when I had the affair, it was you will rationalize every shitty decision that you make, like right through, like bad decision exists behind door number 2. You will rationalize the whole way there as you high step through. And we do that to suppress our conscience, right? Because we don't want to feel bad about the shit we're doing. So we need to rationalize so we can justify the shit we're doing. That's what we do. Yeah. So when I had the affair and, then I broke the affair off after a couple of years and really wanted to, like I was devastated. My wife was devastated. And really tried to work on things, but she was too hurt at that time. And I blamed everybody. It's your fault for not being this kind of wife, and it's your fault for seducing me, and this, And so it wasn't until I detached from all that, and then I actually started working on progressive therapy for me, that I was able to look and say, these were all your choices. Yeah. These were all your choices. Like you made the choice to do these things. And when I started doing that, I started healing and I started growing. And this is kind of things I've been open about. It's like when my wife, when she left me, Most people don't talk, I think, this transparent about their life at times.
I think it's brilliant. It's refreshing, right? It beats just talking about sets and reps.
Yeah. So when my wife left me, she was absolutely, dude. She was like nuclear. Like it was like she was scorched earthing my shit on the daily, like absolutely being her as horrendous as possible to me daily, weekly. And I had worked so hard to get out of that really dark place I was in for so long that no matter what she did, I wouldn't retaliate. I would, because I knew she was hurting, and I knew she was doing this as she was hurting. And for like 7 months, man, this is a period I almost still can't talk about without getting emotional. Whew. So like 7 months went by. No matter what she did, I wouldn't say anything ugly to her. I wouldn't retaliate. She did a lot of bad stuff to me. And she showed up at the house one day and she was crying. And she's like, I'm like, what's wrong? She's like, can't do this stuff to you anymore. She's like, no matter what I do, she's like, you just keep loving me and supporting me.
Yeah.
And I remember like that was the breakthrough. Like that was when we kind of started healing together, like through everything that happened. And she acknowledged a lot of her part in the breakdown of our marriage that happened before I stepped out. She had gotten lost in the kids. She didn't pay attention to my life anymore. Yeah. You know, she didn't know who I was. I remember things were bad. We sat down one night and did one of those 50 questions about your spouse thing. And I could still tell her everything about her. She didn't know anything about me anymore.
Well, I remember you saying something on Geared Up once about like, it's really important. You used a certain term. I can't remember what it was, but it was, I think your analogy was, say she's doing a crossword or something.
That's called a bid. A bid. B-I-D.
Okay, yeah.
So that's one of the most important things you can do to cultivate a harmonious relationship with your significant other. I mean, this has been researched for decades. So a bid is like, so like if your wife or your girlfriend is doing a crossword and she looks at you, she's like, hey, what's a 4-letter word for whatever? So she's giving you a bid. So it's like she wants you to be interested or involved in her life, and she's offering you an opportunity to do that with something she's interested in. So if you look to her and you're like, I don't know, hon, let me think for a minute. What is a 4-letter or whatever? That's called an inwards turn. So you're joining her in that moment of when she's offering you, please be a part of my life. Yeah. So if you were like, I don't know, I don't give a shit, who cares? That's an outwards turn. Those outwards turns are what end up causing the most amount of hostility physiologically within a relationship. Like they can literally measure it in couples. They can sit them down and strap them up to like electrodes and measure the amount of physiological stress. And it's almost always based on inwards or outwards turns. So the more times that you turn inwards to your partner's bids, the more intimacy you'll have, the more connection you'll have, the more closeness you'll have. That's like such a huge part of cultivating an amazing relationship with another person.
It's interesting because you're open up, so I'll just be honest too. My parents, like I look at my dad and my stepmom, and I look at that actively and think that is a relationship that, and I hope to God my family don't listen to this. That is a relationship that I do not ever want. Like they sit on the sofa separately. You know, my stepmom watches TV. My dad will be on his laptop. There's no conversation between them. Occasionally my stepmom, she'll ask my dad a question and it'll be a one-word answer. And I look at that and I'm just like, oh man, it's exactly what you're describing. Like he just doesn't give a shit, just mentally checked out. It's a weird, it's like they're just kind of surviving rather than living together,
Absolutely. That's such a weird concept for me to kind of understand because when I love somebody, man, it's all about paying attention to everything about them. Like I love that part of finding somebody to share my life with, knowing everything about them, understanding everything about them, like turning into all their bids, doing everything I can do to make them feel amazing. That's what giving, you go to give to the relationship. That's what that is, right? That's what a bid is. You're giving to the relationship. So somebody's offering you something, and you're like, yeah, absolutely. And the last girl I was with, I always call her Island Girl on, because we have a story about Costa Rica, and we were on Geared Up once, and she actually left Costa Rica a day early. We were fighting so bad. days. And on day 5, she actually just texted me. She's like leaving. She was taking a plane out of there. And
It's an expensive argument.
yeah. And it was horrific, dude. But you know what? I was so hurt and angry for so long at how she treated me for those 6 days in Costa Rica. And that was a big part of a lot of the fighting we had, was holding on to that resentment, right?
Mhm.
Holding on to that. And then we would reconnect and we would start kind of going out and trying to kind of work on things again. That just still sat underneath everything, right? And it would boil out. And one of the things that I worked on was she was not in a good place in her life at that time with some stuff she was dealing with outside of us.
Yeah.
My empathy just sucked. My empathy, I made it all about me, about what I wanted, and I had no empathy for what she was struggling with in the other facets of her life. And if I could do, it sounds funny now, but I've always said never do that trip over because it sucked. More than anything, I wish I had to do over on that trip so that I could be more understanding and more loving about where she was at that time in her life. And that was a failure on my part. And that's what I said earlier. We often get so wrapped up in our selfish wants and needs that we lose empathy for the other person. And we lose the ability to kind of dive into understanding where they're at and what they're struggling with and saying, well, I'm going to love you enough right now that what is it that you need? What do you need? Space? Do you need time? Do you need for me to just be in this moment? Her and I used to have this thing. I don't know if you ever saw that video where the guy's talking to his girlfriend and like her back is to the camera and she's going on and on about how bad her head hurts. Have you ever seen that video?
I haven't seen that, no.
Going on and on about how bad her head hurts. And he's looking at her really confused. And he keeps he's pointing at her and he won't say anything, but he's like pointing at her head and she's talking about how bad her head hurts. And the camera spins around and she's got this gigantic nail like nailed into her forehead.
Mm-hmm.
Just nailed into her forehead. And he goes, honey, he's like, your head hurts because you got a giant nail in your forehead. And she looks at him and goes, it's not about the nail. And I have shown so many guys that video and they don't get it. And I'm like, that's exactly the problem. You don't get it. She just wants his empathy in that moment. She doesn't want a solution. She doesn't want him to fix her problems. She doesn't need him to do that. She knows there's a nail. She wants him to exist in that moment of pain with her and for him to provide empathy and love and nurturing. She doesn't want him to pull the nail out of her head. She's going to do that. She's going to take care of that. She just wants to know that she's loved and cared about while she's in pain. Now, as men, we're fixers. So we're like, well, I can get you out of pain if I take the nail out of your head. But that's not how women function. Women don't function as fixers. We're hunters, right? Women are nurturers, right? And everybody has feminine and masculine energy. And when we can't tap into that feminine energy to kind of meet her at that level when she's suffering, that's where a disconnect happens. And where a woman gets frustrated. She's like, I don't need for you to fix my shit. I just need for you to support me right now.
Yeah.
Does that make sense now?
Yeah. Interesting. So switching gears again to start closing this, what projects right now are you most excited about?
Everything that's going on with T Nation has been really cool. I've got my own coaching forum over there now. The new book, you guys know I'm involved with the exogenous ketone supplements.
Yeah.
That's been really exciting. There's more and more and more peer-reviewed research coming out that supports everything that I've heard Dr. Dominic D'Agostino talk about the last few years, that I've seen anecdotally. It's kind of been a fun little ride because when they first came out, a lot of the experts were absolute massive skeptics and took a shit on them and all this. But I'm like, man, I don't know, because I've been using them with all these clients. I'm seeing some pretty amazing stuff. Mm-hmm. And now that the peer-reviewed research is coming out, all the people who were shitting on it before have kind of voices.
They've quietened down.
What benefits are you seeing? Is it for focus and productivity, or are you seeing?
Well, the first thing that when I started researching them was beta hydroxybutyrate, which is ketone ester. There's just a mountain of research about how it suppresses a low-grade chronic inflammation because it blocks a specific inflammasome that's responsible for it. So that's huge because chronic inflammation is basically related to every major medical disease known to man these days, right?
Yeah, it's like one of the major causes for sure.
Absolutely. So for any of you asked earlier, what would be one of the things that you would do taking care of your health? Dude, taking ketones daily, like because of impact on chronic inflammation. One of the things that I kind of I saw or kind of theorized early when I started using them and started using them with my clients was that for the people who were going into shows and were depleted and like zombies, as soon as they take them in 30 minutes, they were like, everything got turned back on. So I knew it had to be going towards brain energy.
Yeah.
For one. But then everybody would ask me the question, well, what's happening to carbs when I'm taking ketones? And I theorized at the time that there had to be a metabolic shift that happened. And sure enough, we now know that when you take ketones and they're being used as the energy substrate, it actually downregulates glucose oxidation. So the body does stop tapping. I don't know the degree. I think it's been measured so we can understand that.
So theoretically, you'll start oxidizing fat as fuel.
You're using the ketones. So yes, absolutely. Because in another study, what they showed was when you took ketones before steady state cardio, low impact cardio, that fat oxidation was significantly higher than taking like a placebo during steady state.
That's quite interesting.
Yeah, and I actually put that in one of my articles. So think about it this way: like people are like, well, you guys are acting like it's magic in a book. Like, well, it cuts down on chronic inflammation. It reduces the amount of calories you have to take in with the same amount of energy. It gives you a higher degree of ATP with less oxygen use. So your free radicals that are spurned off in that chemical process in the Krebs cycle, there's fewer free radicals. The free radicals are related to the aging, process.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
You have a higher degree of muscle retention while having fewer calories come in, because that was another cool thing was the ketones being used as an energy substrate. Then your body doesn't have to convert muscle protein into glucose via gluconeogenesis. So that means if your body is not pulling muscle protein out to convert it to glucose, then it's sparing your muscle protein.
Yeah.
So while you've got the ketones coming in, you're sparing muscle protein. So once again, you can go into a more hypocaloric state with the same amount of energy. So your fat oxidation is going to be higher. But with a higher degree of muscle retention, you're going to cut down on low-grade chronic inflammation. I don't know what else. Like, if you got one supplement that can kind of do it, and it's like all proved through reviewed research. So I'm like, if you can show me something else that kind of covers this multitude of areas. I mean, everybody made a big deal about curcumin, and they're like, okay, well, yeah, it does a few cool things, but I think the thing that everybody got hung up on was the company that developed it that I'm involved in is based out of like network marketing. And I'm like, well, it's a real business. Like, I don't give a shit. When I talked to Poliquin, because I got Charles involved because he loved the product, knew the science behind it. And Charles asked me a question. He said, is the product legitimate? I'm like, yeah, it's legitimate, totally legitimate. I'm like, I've already used it on about 70 something clients. And he goes, so you're telling me you're going to give me a product that's legitimate with peer-reviewed science behind it that I can make a shit ton of money off of? And I go, yeah. And he goes, and you got a problem with that? I go, I guess not. And it doesn't matter what business model product's based out of. The most important thing everybody should ask, is your product legitimate?
Is it working? Yeah. Is it what it says on the label? Is it backed by science, anecdote?
So like, who gives a shit? So, and I make a great side living off of it. And people that don't want to make, if they don't want to have a side business doing it, that's cool. Don't. But the product is legit. And that was also fasting, including ketones, vitamin D, fish oil. As you can see where I'm going with most of the stuff, it was everything I started doing was based towards reducing inflammation, improving gut health. That's another thing the ketones do, because a lot of the times pretty much everything is wrapped up in our gut health. That'd be a whole long discussion. But that's another thing that does help improve gut health by the effect of reducing things like inflammation in the gut. And 77-80% of your immune system is contained within the digestive tract. So if you improve your gut health and your gut function, you assimilate nutrients better, your immune system improves. Guys should really start there. The stuff so you asked me earlier, it's like that would be one thing, is taking care of your gut.
Yeah, I'm big on gut health as well, actually. Yeah.
Absolutely. So that's pretty much wrapping it up. I think we covered about every damn topic known to man.
Yeah, it's brilliant. We've got a couple of off the cuff rapid fire questions as well to finish.
All right.
Okay, so I know obviously like right now you're doing this intuitive eating, but say you were to go on like another really strict diet, like a bodybuilding style diet, what's your go-to cheat meal?
For the well, I don't really think in terms of cheat meals anymore. But my go-to refeed consistently was sushi.
Okay, sushi. Yep. Favorite drink?
Oh, either a Malbec or a nice cab, but it's got to be a full body Cabernet. Like
Okay.
that's
Akash is with you on that one then.
I'm a big Malbec fan as well. Yeah.
yeah, so fellow wine bro. Yeah.
And the last one, who should we have on our show next?
Who should you have on your show next? I give a shout out to my homie, bring Sweet in.
Okay.
He's a good talk, but don't let him do the same thing. Get him on the hot seat. Tell him that I talked about it. He'll be the same kind of good interview about talking about real life stuff. He'll be amazing for that. So bring him in.
Perfect. Right, where can people find you and your book? We've touched upon it, but plug it, man.
If you go out to the blog, lift-run-bang.com, and you go to the ebook section, it'll be right there. And actually, I've been able to get all my other books from the last few years out there in the last couple of weeks as well. So base building is back out there, which is
a great book.
All the principles have you read that one?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, that was all the principles I developed through powerlifting. Also, it was also what the cool thing was when I wrote base building is I kind of arrived at all these things through my own experimentation. Then I come to find out, these are all really valid scientific principles. It's kind of amazing, like how your intuition after enough years kind of guides you somewhere. And then when you start researching, you're like, all this stuff's been validated through science. Science is always just telling us that bro shit works.
Yeah, it's just like 5-10 years behind. It just reaffirms it.
It's like 5 or 10 years behind. Just tell us, you guys were right. Like, now we need a million studies to tell us 1 gram.
Sometimes it will just give us the why. We kind of know something works, but we're not too sure of the mechanism. And then the science 5-10 years later catches on. And, that's the pathway that it works.
I just saw another one, like a really and I love science and the research. And there's I love Brad Schoenfeld and Alan Aragon's work and chat with those guys. But I always think it was just validating that 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. I'm like, okay, so bodybuilders have been doing that for 40 freaking years now. Like, all right, we know, man. We know. Like after millions of people have done it, and this is the same result over and over. We didn't need a peer-reviewed study, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's true.
Paul, how did you come up with the name Lift Run Bang?
Bro, not a lot of people know this. When I first started the blog, I hate to say this, it hurts me deep inside my chest where I love people from to admit this. When I first started the blog, I actually called it functional strength.
Oh, ouch.
Hold on now.
We're not publishing the podcast now.
Right. My purpose was to redefine that term at the time, because what I believe was functional was to get strong and get in shape, and then your function would exist. Mm-hmm. So it was going to be kind of like, well, I'm going to retake this and kind of make it my own. And I was like, but I wasn't even let anybody read my work then, and I realized that I wasn't going to. So I ended up I don't know how I lift, be strong, be in shape, lift. And I was doing a lot of sprints then, lift, run, bang. Everybody loves the name though, right?
You can't forget it.
Right. That was one of the great things about it. Lift, run, bang. People, they're like, what? And I'm like, they never forget it. You tell them one time. It was one of the few genius marketing things that I did, and I wasn't even trying to market. But the bang, I got asked this when I was on the Superhuman radio, and he's like, what does bang mean? And I was like, it means anything you want it to. And I said that it was actually, I did it that way on purpose. I was a computer engineer, like I talked about earlier, and in coding, you have something called variables. So in coding, you write something that's a variable, and it equals to something that's like a long chain command. So instead of typing the same command over and over again in coding, you write one word equals, and then this long chain. So this one word is the variable. So a variable for you could be anything. So it could be lift, run, football, lift, run, CrossFit, lift, run, it could be something in your life, like lift, run, writing, lift, run, anything, something that you wake up and that is passionate in you, that, invokes, something that drives you every day. So it could be anything. It could be what you're training for, or it could just be something you're living for. But it can be something you want it to. But everybody, it means sex. Yes.
And so it could mean sex for some.
Absolutely, man.
Absolutely.
If you were a porn star, I suppose, lift from bang, that's what you did every day. That was your job. It could be that. Or if you just really were in a period of your life where you really love having sex with your wife or whatever, absolutely could mean that too. So yeah, it could absolutely mean that, but it really is a variable.
That's smart. I like it. Cool. Right, Paul, thank you so much for your time. This has been, I think, well, as you said, like we've covered everything, right? So everyone listening to this is going to resonate with at least one area of this. We've touched nutrition, we've touched health, we've touched relationships, anxiety, supplements, like the full works. So this is awesome.
Yeah, like I said, we cover the full spectrum.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I actually really appreciate it. Like a lot of times when I come on, people want to ask me that. It's a run-of-the-mill podcast where we're talking about history. Like, and I've had the same kind of podcast over and over with people. And I don't know about you guys, but it gets monotonous and boring.
Yeah, for sure.
After a while, and that's what you can tell when you're talking to those guys. You're like, man, this guy really. We talk about loss of identity, right?
Yeah.
The guy is he just lifts weights, man. That's what he does.
There's only so many ways, so many times you can say, do this amount of reps, this amount of sets, eat your diet right. You know.
If you guys are probably like me, you've probably spent an inordinate amount of time reading stuff. And like, man, it really takes something interesting to get me to read a full article pretty much anymore. Because I'm like, okay. You know, I'll read more peer-reviewed research now because I find that more interesting than reading like something that somebody else. I go back and forth. I like both, but somebody better draw me in with their writing at this point, Akash. Like there better it can't just be dry material. I cannot read 10,000 words of drywall, man. I can't.
No, not gonna. Yeah.
But yeah,
right now.
Say
what book are you reading right now?
Right now, I am reading. Hold on. This guy.
7 Levels of Intimacy.
Interesting.
So that's, yeah, I've written quite a bit about intimacy, really vastly important for understanding what it is, you know, cultivating it in your relationships, but even for men, understanding just how important it is to embrace vulnerability so that you can have intimacy in your life. That intimacy is really about being known for who you are, to the depths of who you are, finding a person that you feel willing to share that with. That's what we want in this life. We want to be understood. We want to be known for who we are by somebody. That gives our life meaning.
That's a cool way to end.
Yeah.
That's a cool way to, it's perfect. It's great. Thanks, Paul.
Absolutely, brother. Thanks for having me on. Let me ramble.
No, it's been great. It's been great. So for those of you that want to find Paul through Instagram, because obviously this is where we tend to push the podcast, you can find him on @LiftRunBang. You can find myself, which is @AdamHaley and then the number 1. You've also got @Akash Vagela, and then obviously our business page, which is @RNT_fitness. As we've said, this has been a broad spectrum of topics, so I'm pretty sure you're going to find at least something in this is going to resonate and kind of hit hard.
There's got to be at least one person.
Yeah, this is going to apply to many, all different aspects. Yeah,
can find out about.
No,
Adam,
this is
dark over there.
What's that? No, I've actually got my curtains open, believe it or not, in my room. But where we started the call, you know, at 4:30, there's a bit of light coming in. Now it's coming up to 6:30. It's gone dark. So, and
it is absolutely. It's been a weird transition of light to dark in this whole deal with you guys. It's like the longer we go on, it's like you guys are just not even going to exist anymore.
Yeah, halfway through, I was thinking, should I switch on my bedroom light? But I didn't really want to disturb the flow of the podcast, so I'm sort of just sat here looking at my visual on here. Just you can only see my teeth, really, my teeth and my t-shirt.
Yeah, I just noticed earlier, like it's getting darker and darker where you're at.
That's winter in the UK. It's grey and then dark.
Yeah, well, it's pretty much you guys' summer. The weather in the summer there is not. It's a lot better.
Yeah,
it's always overcast. That's why you guys are depressed and cranky.
Have you been to the UK?
Dude, I've never been. I want to do a seminar over there.
Yeah, if Chris is setting something up, you should definitely run with the FLF thing.
We talked about it when I did this podcast, but we haven't done a follow up. I think we actually even settled on all the numbers. If you guys want to, I'll follow up with him. If you guys follow up with him too, you kind of.
Yeah, well, we're there in literally 2 weeks' time. We're there teaching a seminar ourselves on female fat loss. So I'll mention it to the owner, Rayhan, who's a really cool guy. And yeah, it'll be cool to have you over.
Yeah, I want to come over. I want to get back. I took a few years off from travel and seminars because for a while it was just constant. And when you're doing as many seminars as I was doing a few years ago, it gets old. But I've taken a few years off. I actually traveled all over with Island Girl for a couple of years. We went everywhere.
Yeah.
Had some amazing trips, but I want to get back to doing more seminars and traveling.
Cool.
And,
Yeah, if you come to the UK to teach it, we'll be driving up there. We'll be there for sure.
that would be awesome, man. I would really love it.
Awesome. Whereabouts in the US are you?
I'm right smack dab in the middle of the country, Kansas City.
Kansas City. Cool.
Yeah,
'Cause we're out. Where are we? Northeast, West Coast in May, right?
Yeah.
We're doing San Diego, San Francisco.
No, up in Oregon. Christian Thibodeau and I are up in Oregon at Chris Duffin's place. We'll be doing a couple of days out there for a seminar there. So yeah, that's kind of the start, and I want to get some more places booked the rest of the year because I really want to get back to teaching in person with people, and kind of going over like for years it was teaching same kind of thing you guys saw my own podcast, squat bench deadlift for 3 days. And like I have so much more to offer when I can go in and talk about so many more things. Or one of the things I'll go over like in seminars like how to deal with like life stress, developing mechanism. A lot of guys don't talk about that with lifting, but if you don't have proper coping mechanisms that exist in life, that it takes a huge same kind of thing, systemic toll on your recovery because it's physiologically your body responds the same way.
It's funny. I actually had that was one of the questions I had written down. I said, what were your best tips on reducing negative life stress? So I think we've covered a lot of it.
Negative life stress. That's I love that term.
Yeah.
The best tips for reducing negative life stress, it's going to be a little different for everybody because everybody has different responses to different stress simulators. One of the things I kind of learned when I was going through therapy that really helps is how you speak is so impactful. Like I kind of relearned how I speak. And like, for example, I try not to use absolutes when I talk. Because I noticed when we first started talking, I think I used one and I actually corrected myself. And so it's a concentration, but I try not to use absolutes when I talk. And you guys would be surprised if you make that one change in your life, how it will change how you view things when you take away using absolutes in the way you talk and when you write. Because it doesn't sound like much, but it's actually been proven through a ton of psychological studies how the things that we say over and over impact what we believe and what we think, what we feel. And when we start to internalize those things, they become real in our mind. So if you get many guys like, man, I'm with this girl, she's always bitching at me.
Oh, interesting.
Is that really true? Because if he says that, she's always bitching. Now when she starts bitching, it's an always bitch. Like she's always complaining. She's always, and now what happens is we develop cognitive bias and we start looking for those negatives consistently to reaffirm what it is that we've been saying, that we've internalized, that we believe.
Interesting.
So one of the things that, was actually learning not to use absolutes. Don't use words like always, never, all the time, all that kind of stuff. And if you become cognizant, make that one little change in your life, and it will make you sit back and question over and over again what it is that you really think and how you're evaluating a situation, and just taking a second out in the day. I'll relay this story too, and then I'll try to let you guys go because we've been trying to wrap up. This was a huge moment in my life a few years ago. And I can't remember the principle it was evolved around, but it was just dealing with, it kind of evolved. It was from the whole dealing with absolutes in your life. But it was also dealing with perceptions about reality, which kind of play into that too, right? Like don't say always, don't say never, those kind of things, because then you develop cognitive bias. But it was a story, and I remember my therapist related to me at the time. It's a guy driving to work, and he runs into a red light, and he's pissed off that the light is red. Does that make any sense? Now think about it for a second, and I'll get you there. You already know the light changes colors, and it's an inanimate object, essentially. So now you're pissed off, and you have heightened your degree of stress, frustration for the day over something you already know exists. You know what different colors is the light change. It's red, it's yellow, it's green. That's here. I don't know if it's different there. I don't know that you can. Yeah, red, yellow, green, right? So he's pissed off about something he already knows exists and is functioning the way it's supposed to. So this little story started having a big impact on my everyday life. When I would start getting angry, I would sit back and go, is that something I should really be angry about?
Mm.
So I'm in line a few weeks later. This is the only time I actually made my therapist cry. Told him this story, so it's pretty good. So I never cried in therapy either. Never did. They always have the tissue out there. You know, I'm sure there's people crying. I never cried.
Mhm.
So, and I cry all the time. I just never cried in therapy.
So,
But
ironic.
yeah, I know. I'm in the grocery store, and I get my groceries for the day, and I've really been working hard on this principle. And so there's people in front of me, and it is taking the guy forever. I can't even see. I can't really see. There's something in the way, and I can't see the guy, the cashier, right, who's checking everybody out, and it's taking forever. And I felt that whole want to, I'm talking about, come up that fresh. And I was like,
Mhm.
I pulled out my phone. I was like, you know what? I was like, it's a beautiful day outside. I have a cart full of groceries. I'm going to pull out my phone here and play a game for a minute. Like, life's pretty good. And so what if it takes an extra 15 minutes? Like, I don't have anywhere to pee.
Mhm.
Still that kind of come back down. Well, the two women that were behind me, I could hear them talking. What is taking this asshole so long? Like, can this guy not do his fucking job? Blah, blah, blah. And they were going on. And I remember, I told this story at counseling, didn't think, but it makes me emotional now. I remember thinking at the time, I used to be that guy.
Yeah.
I used to be that guy that'd be standing in line, like bitching if this guy's holding up my day, like for 15 minutes, that really not really hurting me.
Mhm.
The story's not done. I'm going to get there. And this is true. Absolutely 100% true. So I'm not really paying attention because I'm kind of just playing my game on my phone, whatever. I'm in a relaxed state. Women behind me are bitching, like, can this son of a bitch hurry up? But we can't see the guy. I get up and push my cart up, and I look up, and the guy behind the register he has Down syndrome.
Oh.
Right. Yep.
And man, I had a moment
Yeah.
because I was like, I would have been that guy. I would have been standing in line like, why is this son of a bitch taking so long? Why can he not do his fucking job? What, blah, everything those ladies were saying. But we couldn't see the person, right? We couldn't see him because there was something blocking the view of the cashier from where we were standing. So I got there and I looked at him, and he looked at me and smiled. He goes, man, you got big muscles. And I remember when I stood there and he checked me out, and he took a long time. But while he was checking my stuff out, we had like this amazing conversation about lifting weights. And he had started lifting like a couple months before that with like his brother and was learning. And I turned after I got done checking out, and I looked at the two ladies behind me, and you could see that shame
Yeah.
on their face. And I was so happy I wasn't standing there and developed in that feeling of shame for being so self-absorbed and selfish about my day that I would have been sitting there asking, why can't this quote unquote son of a bitch do his job any better, so forth and so on. And that was kind of a moment where I had a turning point of letting go of a lot of anger, like letting go of a lot of control in my life. And now I've got another chapter to start working on, when it comes to, like we talked about earlier, we talked about dealing with, feelings of loss and losing people and how that brings out the worst in you. So I do sometimes recognize that I'm a little bit different from an individual standpoint, that I consistently know that I'm this work in progress. And I'm with a lot of friends, I see repeating the same problems in their life. And when I have them, they're pretty, I get distraught by them because I end up hurting people that I love and care about significantly, or just my life doesn't feel the way that it wants to feel. So sometimes you have to revisit these moments, and you have to kind of offer yourself introspective about the kind of man that you are right now and the kind of man you want to become. And then what's the distance between those 2 points?
Yeah. That's great.
Great story. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. That's an interesting one, right? Yeah. I think I've been guilty myself of being that person that check out tuts and.
Oh, we all have, man. The point is just to implement some measures like that, to ask yourself, like I said, don't use absolutes, and ask yourself, what is it I'm really pissed off about? And start peeling back some of the layers to get down to the root of what it is that causes you this anxiety or this fear. But you have to be willing to ask yourself why and be vulnerable about what those things really are. Most of the time, it almost always comes back to something that happened to us when we were young.
Yeah, rather than the superficial stuff like the
Absolutely.
checkout, right? Yeah, something deep on it. Interesting.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Paul.
Absolutely, bud.
Thank you. Right. Enjoy the rest of your day. This has been amazing. Thank you.
Right. I appreciate you guys having me on.
No, thank you very much.
All right.
Well, we'll message you when the episode is out, just to give you a heads up on it.
Okay. Yeah, that was a good talk, guys. Like I said, a lot of people don't allow me to cut loose, so I appreciate it.
No, it's one thing I said to Akash before we had you on was, Adam McVeigh's like, obviously he's got a cool sense of humor, but when you start to go in depth, you just see he just cuts people off. Whereas I said to Akash, I wanted to purposely get you on and just let you run with it. Like I find this shit interesting.
And I think that's because, I think Adam's he struggles with a lot.
He's dealing with stuff. You can tell it. Yeah.
A lot of stuff, and then he even talked about this last episode. I'm like, he's like, well, I don't want us all holding hands and singing Kumbaya. So he's fearful. He wants to approach those topics, but then his own, whole male, like, oh, I'm going to be weak if I approach this stuff. And I really think it's the opposite. I think a very strong male is completely comfortable with being open and transparent.
Yeah.
This is who I am. This is what my struggles are. This is what my strengths are, and those kind of things. So that's kind of been the transcending point in my life the last few years. And it took a lot of courage to put stuff like that out there. But then what happened was I started getting messages all the time from people. It's like, something you wrote, like, absolutely helped me through this really hard time. And then I started realizing, as men, we have become so emotionally restrictive in our life that when another man finally steps up and goes, man, I'm really struggling with this, and this hurt my heart, and this is how I feel, we gravitate towards that really quickly, because we're like, man, I've been hurting and dealing with this for so long, and I haven't been able to express it or talk to a friend or anything that, like, just, yeah, I'm going through that too. And connection, identification through brokenness and suffering is one of the strongest things we absolutely have from a human condition standpoint. Is when somebody can look at you, or you can look at them and say, man, I'm struggling with this. I'm really broken with this. And they're like, I know exactly where you're coming from. And there's a part of a healing that takes place in those moments as well between us. Yeah. So that's just been something that I just do now. I'm like, I don't give a shit. I don't care if people's like, that's Nancy boy stuff or that's weak. I'm like, that's cool. It just tells me you're a very insecure man. You need to go work on some of this stuff.
Yeah, no, it confirms that, right?
Well, you think you found this is your true purpose now, as transcending beyond fitness, and it's more helping? I
do, yeah, and it has been for a while. I started a group a while back for guys who have porn addiction and struggle with porn. I don't have a problem with porn. I've never had a problem with porn. And I started doing a lot of research on porn and what it does to the neuroplasticity in your brain, how it rewires. It's a super normal stimulus. So when guys are like, well, porn's okay, I'm like, nah, it's really not. Like, we have a mountain. We have so much meta-analysis on what it does to you and how it fucks up your relationships and your inability to develop true intimacy, how you view women changes, everything. It does a lot of stuff. And I started working with some guys in this private group, and just 90 days porn-free. Nobody's been able to do it. But the longer they would go for weeks at a time, the more they would see the changes each day happening in their life. But they would always have a trigger that would pull them back into it. So that's another thing. And I felt like there has been kind of a shifting transition in my life. I find helping people deal with these kind of things, these hurts and pains and areas of their life that they feel stuck in and gridlocked, and they want to improve on so much, is so much more rewarding. So you can give somebody both, get them in better shape, get them in get them sexy, make their body fat lower, get their strength up, or do whatever it is physically that also makes them feel better about themselves. But then cultivate that internal part that should go along with the strong exterior, right? Like if you take a car, and you put a 1,000 horsepower engine in it, but you don't, get the internals hardened, and forged, everything's just going to blow up. And like we talked about earlier, there's so many guys in this industry, they have this external piece that, oh my God, you're like a Greek god and all this kind of stuff, but they can't sustain an amazing relationship or a friendship or whatever, that kind of stuff. And that's the kind of stuff that guys need to start learning to cultivate and to find completeness and wholeness in their life.
Yeah, there's a real need for that, I think.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, dude. Thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. This has been awesome.
Yeah, let me know. Let me know when it hits, and I'll throw it out there for all my social
media. Yeah, I mean, I just want to for me, like, these podcasts, when we talk about training and so on, that's great for our listeners. But actually, every so often we do the odd podcast where it's like, actually, you know what? I'm fucking getting something out of this too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So fuck you, listeners. Actually, if you don't like any of this, actually, I'm enjoying it.
We spent 20 minutes talking about writing, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, right. It was
You don't get that many podcasts.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's always cool to connect with another writer, right? Because you don't. That's what I was talking about just a second ago. That identification thing is such a strong thing for you to find a connection with a person, right? Yeah. That identification. So when you can say, "Yeah, when I do this," you're like, "Oh yeah," that's what we find. It's how we find connection with people.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Paul. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too, guys.
Take care. Bye. No worries. Bye.
All right. Bye.